I love that graphic. Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everybody. Thank you for joining the Brain Cancer Initiative today, EBCI, for this disease education, awareness, and outreach event. And it's really, we have two events actually happening today, which is super exciting. And we'll talk about those in just a moment. But it is my pleasure to bring to you right now our Know All Your Treatment Options event, as well as our National Hope Award Disease Education, Awareness, and Outreach campaign and initiative. And so the person who's speaking to you right now is me. Next slide, please. I'm Dellanne Elliott Midland, and I am actually the co-founder of the End Brain Cancer Initiative, formerly known as the Chris Elliott Fund. And today I need to ask everyone to put themselves on mute, please. Okay, so I'm Dellanne Elliott Midland, the co-founder of the Chris Elliott Fund, which is now doing business as the End Brain Cancer Initiative. And I'm today's acting CEO. I'm also the president and the chair of this organization, which is actually just celebrated 21 years yesterday. So literally 21 years ago, yesterday, my late husband, Chris Elliott, and I created this foundation with the idea of helping patients access specialists and clinical trials, advanced treatments, diagnostics, devices, etc., much sooner than maybe perhaps that they would. And so today, I am very proud to lead that effort. And one of the things we do is we bring programs like this to all of you globally. Today is really exciting. We've got people from Mexico and Brazil and Germany, Japan, the United Kingdom, India, Canada, Switzerland, Poland joining us. It's pretty exciting when you can do a global event and really create disease education globally. So thank you so much for joining us. This event doesn't happen all by itself. We work with sponsorship partners from industry. And for this particular event, the Know All Your Treatments Options event, our presenting sponsor is Ono Pharmaceuticals, and you will hear from them a little bit later today. Also IMVAX, and also Gammatile Therapy, which is a GT medical product that you will also hear about a little bit later in our program today. So I think we should just get started, shouldn't we? I have an announcement to make on the next slide, which is really exciting for me. The EBCI is actually expanding. We are a national organization that is based just outside of Seattle, Washington, but we work with all kinds of people from all over the United States nationally. And so we are actually seeking a clinical research nurse to work here in our Patient Services and Support Center in Redmond, Washington, just outside of Seattle, Washington. We are also seeking an advanced executive assistant to support me. I need some help. Things are getting really busy, and I need a gatekeeper. And I need someone who can really just help me do what I do best. And that is put researchers and scientists and pharma together, as well as continue to help patients and families across the nation with disease education, awareness, and outreach. We're also seeking a new disease education mobile app manager. So our disease app is taking off. It's the kind of disease education tool that essentially needs some love and attention every single day. So we're searching for that kind of disease education mobile app manager. And the other position we're looking for is actually Susan Kellner with our team, her counterpart. So we're seeking someone 20 hours a week who is a marketing project manager, who will work also out of our Patient Services and Support Center. So if you're interested, let me know. Submitting your resume to me personally to my email address, which is Dellann, DELLANN, endbraincancer.org. All right, next slide, please. So today is all about learning. It's all about being inspired, and it's all about sharing and creating community. So thank you again for joining us. So I'm thinking that we need to, next slide, please. There are a lot of people that are involved in putting together disease education opportunities. And again, we would like to thank Onos Pharmaceutical and IMVAX, GammaTile, Cure, Northwest Biotherapies, Cox Media, Medexus Pharma, the Ivy Brain Tumor Center, Core Cryo, Piedmont, Endeavor Biomedicines, Great Purpose Productions, Genentech, and NovaCure, and there are many other, as well as the individual supporters who support our mission and our work. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We cannot do this wonderful work without all of you. Next slide, please. And having said that, if you ever want to support our work and you're an individual, feel free to text EBCI to 44321, or of course, go to our website, endbraincancer.org, and hit that donate button or scan right here from your screen just to lend your support to our work. Thank you so much. Next slide. Okay, guys, this is super exciting. So every year we hold a campaign and initiative, which is a disease education campaign, and it's called our National Hope Award. And what we do is we ask people out there to submit to us nominations for the people in their life who have a brain tumor or brain cancer, who inspire not only them, but who inspire others with the way that they're living with their brain tumor, the way they're treating their brain tumor, just their positive attitude, just what they're doing, and whatever they're doing, how that inspires others. And so it's so much fun to be able to present this award every single year. And ideally, we would do this in person, but we can't do that right now. And we had so many cool nominations come in. And again, I want to thank NovaCure for being a very long time sponsor of this initiative for the End Brain Cancer Initiative. And this year, we'd also like to thank IMVAX, Great Purpose Productions, and WIM Social for also supporting this effort in a big, big way. So I think what we should do now, I'm thinking maybe we should just meet some of our people who were nominated and some of the people who nominated them. What do you think, Susan?
That sounds good.
Okay, let's go. Hit it.
It's always something, right?
Oh, it's technical, it's Friday. Everybody just have a little patience. It's worth waiting for. Oh, here we go.
Yeah. Sean, do you need help? There's Sean. She's probably going to go to the backup since it didn't play in the slideshow. She's probably pulling it up on another screen. So
cool. All right.
Any moment now.
It's awesome.
This really builds the excitement.
It does.
About some of our nominees. And we had so many, but you can only highlight so many.
We can only highlight and interview so many. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a genuine treat to get to meet so many of these people. Okay, here we go.
You might have to start it over. Oh, there's no sound.
That's just because Shaw needs to turn her sound on. Oh. Bear with us. And somebody did put in the chat box, they wanted to know if this entire event is being recorded, and absolutely, yes, it is. Well, that's too bad. I watched it this morning on my phone.
Yeah, and just so everyone knows, it is on our YouTube channel right now. We put it on there this morning. It is a very inspiring video. I'm bummed it's not working at the moment, but it's out there for you guys to be able to watch.
And Sean's going to keep working on that maybe while we roll forward.
Yes, Susan, do you have it to play off your system?
I could share my screen and see if it works.
Yeah, I can pass to you.
Okay. So go ahead, Delianne, and we'll figure this out on the back end.
Okay, because we do want to play it.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, what we're going to do is we're going to showcase last year's National Hope Award, Fran Noonan. And I know we have a photo of her that we would want to put up. And I just talked to her daughter again a few days ago, and Fran is actually doing really, really well. Her scans are clear. And you see her there actually with her doctor, Dr. Andrew Sloan. And she had a bit of a scare, actually. She ended up with sepsis. But she has recovered from that, and she's doing really, really well. And she just wants to help others. And she says, hope doesn't stop with her. She passes it on. So I just wanted to share that and say, hi, Fran. And thank you for all of you that you're doing to inspire and help others as well. Thank you so much. Okay, so what we did is we put together a few photos of some of our nominees this year. So maybe we could start with that. Next slide, please. Is that the video?
I think, Sean, you need to just go forward like 2 slides. There you go.
So I want you to meet Lindsay Batista right now. Her mom, Nurse Batista, is actually joining us today, and she nominated her daughter, Lindsay. And one of the things that she explained and shared with me about Lindsay is that, you know, she's a US Navy vet, and that she has always liked to mentor people. And she started doing that in a really, really young age. And now she's part of the Wounded Warrior Project. And so she's still inspiring so many other people. And she takes her dreams seriously. And something else that I thought was super inspiring about Lindsay is she is on her way to receive, I think you call it your degree in radiology, radio oncology, I should say. And so that's really cool. So I just wanted to say thank you, Julie Batista, for honoring your daughter and sending in your nomination. It's been a joy to get to meet her through you. Thank you. And another person that we would like to share with you, his name is Simon Chan. And he's really inspiring. He wants to help other people who are going through brain tumors and brain cancer. And he's really interested. He's actually from here, the Pacific Northwest. He's interested in creating all kinds of different meetups, right? He wants to create community. And there you see a picture of him right there. And thank you, Simon. I hope you're joining us today. And thank you, Lyda, for nominating him. Thank you very much. Another one of our nominees is Jen, and we actually met Jen a little while ago earlier today. Jen Ortiz. She is also one of our nominees this year. She's fantastic. She she uses her humor and her dry sense of humor and her smile to get through every single day and to inspire others. So I just want to say, Jen, it's been really, really cool meeting you, and you are inspiring in every single way. So thank you so much. And then one of our other nominees is Nicholas. And Nicholas, we will see that video because you'll get to meet these people through the video as well. And Nicholas is, his wife nominated him, and he is 38 years old, and she finds him incredibly extraordinary at how he is handling his brain cancer. She says, I want to nominate my husband because he is trying to offer hope to patients that otherwise have very little. And on good days or bad ones, he says he will continue to share hope with as many people as he can. I mean, that's incredibly inspiring. Thank you so much, Diane, for nominating your husband, Nicholas. And I think we have another person also that we want to talk about today. Her name is Alyssa. Is that right? Oh, I think we just spilled the surprise. Alyssa, congratulations. You are our 2023 Hope Award winner. Congratulations, and thank you for inspiring all of us at the End Brain Cancer Initiative, but also in your hope to inspire and work with others who have been diagnosed with cancer. So Alyssa, are you joining us today? No, I don't know. I know you signed up to join us, but
wait, I'm here. I don't know if you can see me.
I can't see you. Oh, I see you
Okay.
now. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Congratulations. Congratulations. Did you hear? We just awarded you our 2023 National Hope Award.
All right. Can you hear me? I'm so sorry. This phone is just not working right now.
I can hear you. We can
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much. That's so exciting.
Take a few minutes just to tell us what you shared with me when we got to meet.
Yeah. So when we talked a little bit about my story and how I found out about this brain tumor over a notification on my phone, not through a doctor personally. So it was definitely a bit harder to take in the fact of what just happened at my appointment that happened 30 minutes ago. It was very fast. The surgery came very fast. And then the journey after the surgery has felt very long, but you get through it with your family. I don't know if you guys can see me, but my mom's right next to me.
Oh, hi, Mom. How are you?
Hi, good. I am so happy and proud of her. I didn't even know she was going to actually apply for this.
She did.
So I'm so proud of her. She's been so positive.
So
positive.
My family gets me through everything.
Well, one of the things you told me that I thought was really inspiring is you said ever since your surgery, you feel like your positivity has been advanced. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so after my surgery, you don't realize how much you have until it's taken away from you. And a lot was taken away from me. I forgot how to walk. I couldn't listen to music. I couldn't take my blankets over my face. Like the light hurt so much. There's so much that we just take for granted on our everyday life. Like even my mom helping me with the bath. Like I couldn't take my own shower. There's so much to be grateful for. So when people have bad days, you should just remember what good happened during your day. Because there is things to look forward to.
There is definitely. So you said, hope is everything and more. Hope is having a second chance at life. Hope is knowing there will be light at the end of the tunnel And hope is knowing there's always a rainbow after a storm. And one of the things you said, which I think is so, so important as well, as you said, if I could speak to someone in industry, in any aspect of the brain tumor research organizations, pharma, etc., I would say thank you. Thank you to speaking out and devoting your time and life on a topic that isn't talked about enough, and that's brain cancer. I would also like to say to please never give up, as one day we will find a cure. We will find a way to fight and to help everyone live a long life, long, healthy life. So well said, Alyssa.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh. Well, okay, so your award will be shipped to you all the way across the country.
Thank you. I'm so excited.
And sometime we will actually meet in person when I'm in that New York area. And I just want to say thank you for inspiring so many other people. And the photos that you sent in were also incredibly inspiring. And so you and I will be talking. I would love your help creating more voice and awareness for people such as yourself, right? And for the brain cancer community.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. And thank you, and have a great day and a great weekend.
Yes, thank you so much.
Ah, you bet. You got it. Okay. So before we move on, I would like to check with Susan and Sean and just see how where we're at on that video.
Yeah, I think Sean's gonna hand it back to me and we'll see if I can play on my screen. If not, if I did send you guys the link to the actual video itself in the chat, just so you know, but I am going to attempt to play it right now and we will see what happens.
Okay, thank you so much.
You know, we've really just observed his desire to build community, to bring people together, and
you know, there's life with GBM.
you can't fix the brain, you have to rebuild the tracks.
Processing is a really big part of having a tumor.
Her own drive and her mission and her commitment to the Navy, because she truly loves serving.
And then also just a desire to help.
That's something that I have to do myself to pursue. Like, we have to get the word out and show that, yes, you have GBM, but it's something that you can just live with, you know?
So I would say to all of those in the industry to please don't give up. There are patients relying on you, and you are the one who's going to do it. You are the one who's going to hold the cure, the science, the research that's going to bring this to an end.
Yes, ever since this surgery, I feel like my positivity has gone through the roof.
And she's great. She has such a fun sense of humor.
I have two questions. One, will it impact my personality? She said, no. And I said, will I still be funny? And she's like, you might not walk. I'm like, but I can still be funny.
I know that she will with her degree. She really will. And because that is just Lindsay, who Lindsay is. Lindsay has been like that since day number one.
A determination. I don't sit and hope things work out. I make hope happen. My statement was, I'm going to save me and everyone after me.
When you first find out and when you're recovering, it's just, you want to see the good days through all the bad.
You're not sick. You have a diagnosis. That's it.
And you also wrote, I would also say to please never give up. Yes, one day we will find a cure. We will find a way to fight and live a long, healthy life.
Yes, which I 100% think will happen.
When I met Jen, she just really stuck out. She was special and different, and her take on life in this difficult situation really, moved me. It was inspiring to meet someone so upbeat and defiant.
Really, the moral of the story is don't let the Optune, don't let Glio, and don't let what other folks say to you define you.
I'm only 21 and I will never stop having hope.
Yes. She thinks this could have changed the path of where my life was going to where it should be going now. maybe I was my here, maybe to help one person, you know?
Really, you know, what struck me was the, you know, desire to not accept the status quo.
And I always felt that I want internal happiness and I want to dedicate my life to helping others.
I don't know. I just love to help. I love helping. So if anybody could feel better, I would want to help them.
And I'm not a victim, I'm a thriver.
That is so awesome. I just really thank you to all of our nominees and all of those that nominated them. To be honest, all of the brain tumor and brain cancer patients and the metastasized disease to the brain patients that are out there every day,
STC could handle this. We've grown a lot.
that every day that inspire us every single day. Thank you so much. That was really well done. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Sean. Awesome. Okay, I am excited to get to talk to you today and announce our keynote speaker, Dr. Thomas Lechner, and he is with Ono Pharmaceuticals. He's Vice President of Medical Affairs, and he brings over 20 years of oncology, medical affairs, and clinical development experience in the US and Europe. And he recently joined Ono Pharmaceuticals. He is really going to educate us today about a disease. It's brain cancer, but it is incredibly rare. And it's important for all of us to know about this disease, number one. But secondly, it's important for all of us to start understanding why it's often not diagnosed right away and potential treatment options for this disease. So we are delighted to have Dr. Thomas Lechner joining us right now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dylan, for the very kind introduction. And let me just share my screen and hopefully we don't have any technical difficulties.
We have you backed up over here if we do.
Okay.
Okay.
You can see everything?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night to some participants. Thank you so much for having me, Adelen, and the EBCI team. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be here. And I have to say the stories of the nominees just inspired me, and again, is a reason why I get up and go to work every day. So very, very moving, and very congratulations to the winner. It was an incredible story. I have to do a little disclaimer, of course. I am an employee of Ono Pharmaceuticals, which is the sponsor of the Prospect study. And just to give you a little bit of background, Ono Pharmaceuticals is a over 300-year-old Japanese pharmaceutical company. In the last couple of decades, they have been doing some groundbreaking research. And many of you might have heard of a drug called Opdivo, a PD-1 inhibitor that really revolutionized how some solid tumors are being treated globally. And Ono Pharma, the scientists there in Japan, actually developed the drug, and they are not distributing it in the United States, but Ono is behind the research. So a long history of bringing innovative drugs to patients in need. I'm going to talk about a product called tirabrutinib. It is an experimental drug. It's not approved in the United States yet. It's approved ex-US, but the study that I'm going to talk to you about later hopefully will lead to that approval, but right now it's not approved. I cannot give any medical advice during this presentation. And should you be interested or know somebody who might be interested in the study or be a candidate, there is an email listed here that gets you in direct communication with the study team. And some of my colleagues are actually on this call as well. So there's the clinical team that runs the study. You can get additional information going to clinicaltrials.gov, where you can also find the centers that are participating. But you can, of course, contact me directly. So here's my email. I will show it again at the end of my presentation. So please feel free to reach out with any questions you may have, and I make sure that I get you in touch with the right people or even with clinicians if need be. You can certainly also call this number here. That is our general office number, and the colleagues there also know to get in touch with me or with a respective colleague. And if you choose to call, please mention my name. So let's get started and talk a little bit about the disease that we're talking here, primary central nervous system lymphoma. It's a rare lymphoma. So it actually arises from the immune system, from white blood cells, and it arises from diffuse large B-cell lymphoma, which is a very common lymphoma. However, this disease manifests predominantly in the brain. Sometimes it can be found in the spine, in very rare cases in the eyes. So the annual incidence is fairly low, so it's a rare disease. It afflicts 1,500 new cases, patients every year in the United States, but it is a highly aggressive type of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And the fact that it is manifest mostly in the brain is the reason why it is being treated and considered a CNS tumor. It does present some unique challenges, and there's certainly a high unmet need. As I said, it's a rare disease. Nevertheless, it is about 4% of all brain tumors, and the incidences are increasing. It usually afflicts patients that are above 65 and older. And fortunately, we all do get older, but of course, that leads to an increase of specific tumors, and PCNSL is one of those. Delanne mentioned that could be a delay in diagnosis, and I get into the diagnosis and the specific challenges with the diagnosis a little bit later, but that can then lead to a poor prognosis. The diagnosis also includes brain biopsy, so this is an invasive procedure, and again, is sometimes a challenge. Getting the drug into the brain or drugs into the brain can be a challenge, as there's the blood-brain barrier that in a healthy individual, of course, has an important role hindering toxic substance and getting into the brain, but on the other hand, is a challenge to get medications into the brain and to the brain cells. And the currently available treatments, and there is not an approved therapy for relapsed and refractory PCNSL, and I will talk about that later. But there are several chemotherapies and also radiation therapy that's being used, or monoclonal antibodies, and there's a whole list of them, and they can be challenging as well, as they are sometimes not easy to tolerate. And unfortunately, not everybody responds to initial therapy. And there I will talk about the therapies also a little bit later, because there's two ways to go about it: induction therapy followed by consolidation therapy. But as I said, not everybody responds, or patients unfortunately also do relapse after an initial response. So how is the disease diagnosed? I mean, the symptoms can be kind of, common symptoms include nausea, vomiting, could be headaches, difficulties talking, if the eye is impacted, or the nerves in leading to that vision changes can occur, weakness, or even seizures. And sometimes that leads to admission to an emergency room. So not necessarily these symptoms, they may indicate that there's a CNS involvement, but they also can sometimes lead to initial diagnosis that is different. To truly diagnose the disease, a multidisciplinary team is needed, and it may include the general practitioner or the ER doctor, a neurologist, or even an ophthalmologist if the eye is involved. But to really get to a diagnosis that then will initiate treatment, in MRI and a biopsy of the brain is needed. So you can see by this journey that it may take a while to get the diagnosis, and every day that's lost to get into treatment, of course, impacts on the prognosis. And what complicates matters more is if you are in closer to New York or Boston, where we have what we call academic centers, Dana-Farber, Memorial Sloan Kettering, MD Anderson, just to name a few, there, of course, you have the specialists and all the equipment in one place to get a diagnosis quickly. But if you're far away from those centers, and your first physician is your general practitioner or a medical oncologist that is not a specialist for this disease, it could take some time until you get the right diagnosis and the right treatment. So how is the disease treated? The initial treatment, there's two parts. Usually it's called induction therapy, which is a form, most of the time, including high-dose methotrexate. So a form of chemotherapy that's given, and then the physicians together with the patients decides later on if they go for what's called consolidation therapy. So after an initial response, one could then move on to receive further therapies that could sometimes include radiation to the brain, or more and more often these days, it's a stem cell transplant, because of course, if that works, it has a curative intent. The team or the physicians that provide these treatments can be hemato-oncologists, neuro-oncologists, radiation oncologists, or oncologists. So you can see also by the origin of the disease being a lymphoma or originating from lymphoma cells, very often hemato-oncologists are involved, but of course, the neuro-oncologists and neurologists also treat the disease. So after receiving your initial therapy, the patients are being monitored via routine eye exams, MRIs, and spinal fluid assessment. And if there is indeed a relapse or the disease is refractory, and I mentioned that is unfortunately often the case, we call this the relapsed and refractory PCNSL. And there is no approved therapy for that kind of disease. And therapy could then include re-challenging with chemotherapy, so another round of this high-dose methotrexate given, radiation, or you can be enrolling in a clinical trial. And that's, the reason why I'm here today, because I wanted to make you all aware of our ongoing prospect study. So this is a phase 2 study where this molecule tirabrutinib is being investigated in patients that have relapsed and refractory disease in this part of the study. So they have to have received prior therapy, and it has to be high-dose methotrexate-based therapy. And I get to that later because that is sort of the standard of care in the initial treatment. So patients that do not respond or relapse will then be administered tirabrutinib at 480 milligrams once a day. What is tirabrutinib? It is a small molecule. It's a tyrosine kinase inhibitor that inhibits a kinase, the so-called Burton tyrosine kinase. And in impacting or hindering that pathway to function, the tumor cells then stop growing and actually die. The medication is given, as I said, orally once a day. There are 6 pills to be taken, and it has to be administered on an empty stomach. The reason for that is our scientists found out if given with food, you achieve a higher concentration of the drug, but that then comes or can come with the price of having a higher rate of adverse events. And our scientists and physicians thought we don't want to expose patients unnecessary to that. And given it in what we call a fasted state, that risk can be minimized or can be reduced. What do we want to see? Of course, we want to see response. So the objective response rate, which is a measure that the tumor is actually reacting and shrinking. And we also want to see how long is the response lasting, because patients will be treated with this medication until progression or until they cannot tolerate the drug any longer. So this is the part A of our ongoing study. And we have a part B, and this is a very complicated slide, and I'm trying to get through it in a fashion that I get the key points across, because the main difference here is these are newly diagnosed patients. So if you remember the patient, they went through all the diagnostic workup, they finally have the confirmed diagnosis. They do unfortunately have PCNSL. And then there is the high-dose methotrexate regimens. And I highlighted those in this red bracket, because in the United States, there is 2 regimens that are predominantly used by clinicians to treat the disease. And they both contain high-dose methotrexate. And you can see here some other ingredients, chemotherapeutics or a monoclonal antibody, such as rituximab. What we are trying to investigate, and my colleagues and clinicians at Ono Pharma, together with our investigators, if we add tirabrutinib to these 2 regimens, do we see additional clinical benefit for the patients that are in the study? First, we need to understand, is it safe to add the drug? So you can see here, we're increasing the dose. We have SC is called safety assessments. And once we know it can be safely administered, at some point, the participants, the clinicians who run the study will then determine if we move forward with both these regimens or one into later stages that hopefully will also at some point lead to the approval of tirabrutinib for patients that are newly diagnosed. So this gets me to the end of my presentation. I tried to keep it very short, as Delaine said, very open to questions right afterwards, but also please reach out to either the prospect study team at onopharma.com. Feel free to reach out directly to me. Here's my email again, thomas.lechner@ono-pharma.com, or you can also call this number and ask to be connected to me, or we will get back to you, or I get you in touch with the appropriate person to address any questions you may have about the prospect study. And I wanted to thank Delaine again and the EBCI for the opportunity to represent Ono Pharma and the prospect study team, and to speak on behalf of our company. And I hope this was of interest, and again, here to address any questions you might have in the remaining time of Q&A. Thank you for your attention. Truly appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Lechner. Really fascinating talk. And I know you just educated a ton of people about this particular disease, which is incredibly hard to diagnose. And something that is, I found, the word fascinating is not the right word, right? I found that we have to do something about it, is that there are no approved drugs in the United States to date to treat this disease, correct?
That's correct. There is no approved drugs. There is quite a few drugs that are listed in what's called the NCCN guidelines, which usually leads a physician can use it, but in most cases it's also reimbursed. But of course, it would be better if we have more approved drugs available.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, I'm going to be quiet, and I would love to open this up to the audience to feel free to unmute yourself and ask Dr. Lechner your question, and then mute yourself back again. That would be awesome. Thank you so much. Any questions? Okay, so again, if you know anyone who currently has or will be diagnosed in the future, with this disease, Dr. Lechner just gave you his contact information. I encourage you to share this information with them, with your entire network, because we need to help this patient population, and we can. And we also can move science forward and to the day where we see an FDA approved treatment option in the United States for this disease. Thank you so much. All right.
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
Hi, this is Jen Ortiz. My brain tumor is a little bit different, but I was wondering if you have advice for like all tumor patients regarding physical activity and how they should go about that. And also, do you guys currently, or again, I may have missed it, I apologize, investigating different types of trial drugs across the country that you may refer patients out to?
To the first question, Jen, unfortunately, I cannot, comment on, give any medical advice here. Would encourage you to talk to your physician. And if I understood the second question, if you're asking, do we have any other investigational products that we are currently investigating in other brain tumors, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, no, we don't. So we only investigating currently tirabrutinib in this rare form of CNS lymphoma, brain tumors. We have other compounds in early development for other types of cancer, such as lymphoma. But this is our only drug that we're investigating in brain tumors right now.
No, I appreciate it. Any investigation of any type is amazing. And thank you for all the work that you do.
Thank you, Jen. As I said before, this is the inspiration that makes me go to work every day. So I'm glad I could provide a little bit of information. Hopefully it's helpful.
Thank you, Dr. Lechner and Ono Pharmaceuticals for investing in this disease. It obviously needs your help. So thank you so much for bringing your clinical trial to the US for this disease. I really, really can't thank you enough. And I know that I'm speaking for a lot of people as well. So I would like to introduce our next speaker, Dr. John Hood. And he is the founder, CEO, and executive chairman of a company based in San Diego named Endeavor Biomedicines. And you see an email on your screen right now. That is how you get a hold of Dr. Hood. If you have any questions on what he's going to talk about, which is really critical. He's a 20-year veteran of the San Diego life science community, and he's participated in the founding and leadership of several San Diego biotechs. Let's see, I really would rather just let him talk. He's amazing, but he's going to talk about something today that none of us know enough about, which is advances in precision medicine, next generation sequencing, testing, and breaking barriers with clinical trials. There's so much that the general public doesn't understand about genomic testing and biomarkers and next generation sequencing and comprehensive genomic, and how you identify in solid tumors the molecular makeup basically of that actual tumor, and how targeted therapy is really using therapies to target those biomarkers in that particular solid tumor. And that's something all of us need to think about and learn more about, because that is the way science is moving. So Dr. John Hood, I would like to turn this over to you. Are you ready?
I am. Thank you so much for the introduction. It was really warm and nice. And thanks for everyone coming on today. It's always a pleasure to meet you. And one of the things when I'm talking to patients is it's incredibly important to be your own advocate. And by being here today, I can see that you're all doing that. And that's insanely impressive. And thank you. I'm going to see if I can share screen really quick. Believe this is it.
Thank you.
All right. And there we go. Everyone sees it okay?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. So I'm going to talk a little bit about precision medicine, NGS testing, and what you can do by getting into a clinical trial. And I'll talk a little bit about the clinical trial that Endeavor's running in particular. And you probably already know a fair amount about NGS, but just to make sure everyone's on the same page, I'll do a couple quick slides on that and explain why we're doing it and where I believe the treatment of cancer is going. So in the past, traditional cancer treatments, largely chemotherapy, it's non-specific in that it stops the ability of any cell to grow and divide, whether it's a cancer cell or a normal cell. It does have some level of specificity in that certain regimens work best for certain types of cancer, but overall, it's just targeting proliferating cells that are growing, and that gives severe side effects, and there's a pretty significant risk of cancer reemerging. Because healthy and cancer cells alike are both targeted, it becomes very challenging to get to a complete kill of the cancer, which may be more resistant. In contrast, targeted therapies. These are therapies that specifically target the mutated proteins that drive the cancer to grow and spread. And different cancers and even different patients with the same cancer can have very different mutated proteins that are driving or causing their cancer. And this is to go back to one of the things that Alyssa said earlier on. She had this hope that we will develop a cure for cancer. And I don't think we'll develop a cure for cancer, but we're developing cures for specific cancers by going after what it treats. Back in the 90s, Brian Drucker, Novartis, they showed that by inhibiting the cause of chronic myeloid leukemia, patients were living very long lives. You actually were having tremendous clinical benefit by going after the root cause of the disease. We're trying to do that in more and more cancers now. And it's not just through targeted therapies. There's also things like immuno-oncology that can help certain patients. And we're actually creating subsets of patients for which we have very significant clinical benefits. We're able to significantly improve their lives. So for individuals with a single mutated protein that's really driving their cancer, inhibiting that with a targeted therapy can have profound clinical benefits with fewer side effects. And the key thing is testing is needed. That's done by other companies to reveal which mutated proteins are in an individual patient's tumor. And that's something you can work through with your oncologist. There's a number of companies that do this. More and more states are actually requiring insurance to pay for it. It can be part of your standard cancer regimen. And one of the other things is a number of the tests can be done now just with a simple blood draw. You no longer need an actual sample of the tumor. So phlebotomy is sufficient. They throw it into the lavender top tube, just like they do on probably every visit for something else. It's just one more tube. What you get by doing that, and let me actually shrink my screen so I can see my own slide. By getting NGS or next generation sequencing, you can actually get smarter about your cancer. Your oncologist can get smarter and get to a better therapy. They understand the driving mutations. As I said, there's lots of companies, wherever you are, there's people that will do that. And the patients with fewer types of mutated proteins are likely to respond better to a targeted therapy because their tumor is critically dependent on that protein. And by inhibiting it, you can actually rip out cancer at its root. Okay, I'm going to tell you, this is an example. This is the molecule we're working on, ENV101. There's an ongoing clinical trial with this agent right now. Taletagib is its formal name. 101's a lot easier to say, so that's what you're going to hear me say over and over. This is a molecule that was originally being developed by Eli Lilly, specifically for basal cell carcinoma. They put it through a lot of patients already, close to 200, many with cancer, and some healthy volunteers. So the molecule that's being evaluated today has a lot of safety data. We understand what the molecule's doing. It's well along in the clinical trial paradigm. Now, when Eli Lilly first introduced that molecule, NGS was not yet common. So they could only go after basal cell carcinoma, in which case 70% of BCC is driven by mutations in this pathway. What we can do today and what we in-licensed it for is to use the same molecule on the 2.5% of patients without BCC, but still have the same mutation that's really driving it. So that can be a fair number. In medulloblastoma, it's roughly 25% of the patients. It's also seen with a decent frequency in neuroblastoma as well, and at a much lower level frequency in glioblastoma. So if you do have that mutation, we know from previous data that this molecule has an opportunity to be very, very effective. The specific mutation we're looking for is a patch 1 loss of function mutation, and that activates this pathway, the hedgehog pathway. The hedgehog pathway typically is very active during embryonic development, not that active in adults. The only times it becomes active in adults is in wound healing, or for the most part active is in wound healing and oncogenesis. So this becomes very problematic. This becomes something you can actually inhibit that is unlikely to be active in an adult patient. So it creates a ripe opportunity to have a significant treatment benefit without significant side effects. The other thing that's been noted is patients with patch 1 loss of function often don't have other common driver mutations. This is really important as well, because that means inhibition of pathway, because this is frequently the only driver mutation can have profound clinical benefit for the patients. We do have, as I said, Lilly originally was running this with basal cell carcinoma. There was one patient that was treated with stage 4 medulloblastoma. And in that one patient, we were very happy to say they had a complete response. So the tumor completely shrank. So if you have the right background mutation, there's a good chance that this could be effective for you. The clinical trial we currently have going on, you can find it on clinicaltrials.gov, but it's far more efficient just to email us. We can put you in touch with whatever facility is closest to determine if you have the right mutation and see if you're eligible for the trial. Have to be more than 18 years of age. There are some patients who will take under 18, but there's specific requirements on bone, because the one thing it doesn't happen post-embryonically is it's important for bone plate fusion. So typically under the age of 13, it would be much more problematic. And you have to have patch 1 loss of function confirmed via NGS testing. Your physician can help arrange NGS testing if you don't already have it. And failed current standard of care or refused standard of care. Those are really the main things we're looking for. We're looking for patients who can benefit, i.e. they have the right mutation and they've exhausted other standard of care, so that we're not having to withhold something that could otherwise benefit. And a question we're frequently asked about is there's a lot of barriers to a clinical trial. Your clinical trial site might not be your closest hospital. So in things like travel costs, we can provide a travel concierge that reimburses these costs. We try to help you. If there's often, if the sites are very far away, there's often a right in time or just in time site. So we can open up a clinical trial site just for you. And that may only take as long as 1 to 2 weeks. Insurance, you don't have to have insurance. We'll pay for that. We've actually had some concerns about confidentiality in the past, and we just want to confirm to everyone that that's strongly maintained. We don't know your name. We don't know your identity. For us, the data is linked to a numbering, and we're looking to make sure you're well taken care of, but we don't know you. Stigma, you're not a guinea pig. We care. All we're trying to do is help you live longer and feel better. So if you actually have the right background, we would love to bring you in. Other issues sometimes can be more difficult, but if you have an underlying concern like child care or time off, just reach out, and if we can do something to help, we will. And we also, even if you don't have the mutation we're working on, I encourage you to go to some of the patient matching services like XCures or Leal Health, and they can be a cancer Sherpa for you, guiding you to what could be the best care, the care that's specialized and tailored just for you, and identifying the clinical trial sites closest to you to be able to give it. And once again, if you have any questions, if there's anything we can potentially do to help you, please reach out. You've got our phone number and email on the screen, and I'm sure that End Brain Cancer would be happy to send it to you as well. All right, I'm going to stop the share and open it up for questions.
I would like to say thank you, Dr. Hood, for addressing this topic, but also addressing the barriers to clinical trials. Those are real, and your company obviously understands that. Thank you so much for bringing that up and addressing it. One of the things I'm curious about is can you talk more about the individual clinical trials that your company is able to set up wherever the person is in the United States?
Yeah. So that goes into it's a really interesting concept. The other speakers may be able to speak to it as well. I don't think it used to happen. They're called right in time or just in time sites. And in that case, if you're you're not right next to a major comprehensive cancer center like Sloan Kettering or MD Anderson, et cetera, but you want to be a participant in the trial and you qualify for the trial, there's hundreds of sites in the nation right now that use one centralized review committee that we're already past. So we can open up that site. We've opened one up in as few as 8 days. So we spec out the nurses, the oncologists there, they qualify, they understand the drug, they're open, because we've already gone through the review board that would allow us to go through. They use it centralized. And that's been incredibly useful. It's really saved us. We've had patients in other places have to travel literally hours to get to the clinical trial site. And, I'm sorry, if you don't feel well, being in a car for 2 hours both ways is onerous, it's daunting. So this is a way we can hopefully get sites open that are much, much closer.
Thank you. That is amazing and encouraging. Does anyone else have a question for Dr. Hood? So I do have another question myself. Going back to liquid biopsies.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was, first of all, we're learning a lot about liquid biopsies ourselves at the End Brain Cancer Initiative. And we're really excited about the opportunity potentially to know exactly what kind of brain tumor somebody has before surgery.
Yeah.
Sometimes that can happen with those liquid biopsies. But something you said was really interesting. Yes, we are all working on reimbursement for next generation sequencing testing, and we've had some success. We've gotten actually some through the Medicare, Medicaid system, as well as evolved through different health insurance companies. It's an ongoing piece of work that actually EBCI does on the behind the scenes. But you said something about liquid biopsies perhaps could actually be included, you know, in your regular checkup or your regular, do you know what I'm trying to ask you?
Yeah, so because you can do it as a simple phlebotomy now and go into a lavender top tube, it's much easier to do it when you're seeing your oncologist. You just have to see an RN and they can send it out quickly and easily. And the reimbursement angle, I think it's going to take a while for the insurance companies to get through it, but the last I saw, we're up to 14 states that absolutely require insurance to pay for it.
Good.
Which is enormous, because there's a tremendous variability in cost. There's some that are under $1,000 now, and B. Anderson, I think, is $6,000. So getting that paid for is huge.
Wonderful. Anyone else have a question for Dr. Hood? Oh, I see Mary Lou, you have your hand up. Will you unmute yourself, please? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I hope I'm going to be clear. So my son has a diffuse midline glioma. He's seeing his oncologist on Tuesday. Should he request a next generation sequencing?
I actually think everyone should request NGS,
Okay.
because even if there's not a targeted therapy that's for you, a lot of times NGS testing will help indicate what other therapies can potentially benefit. You can get guidance from that. So yes, I 100% think anyone should get it.
Once we have that, if he doesn't have a pitch one, what kinds of things should he be looking at?
Well, I think that would be a great time to reach out to someone like XCures, and that's a service that doesn't cost anything. And they'll look at his background mutations and be a matchmaker for the best standard of care for your son.
How do you spell that?
XCures.
We can help you with
Okay,
that.
thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
We can actually, we can put you together with them, as well as we can actually upload your records as well to XCures. We have a contract with them to be able to do that to help patients.
It's such a great service that's been put in. It's so hard. One of the things I found most shocking was a local Illumina does all the gene sequencing. Their machines do. Their former CEO, Jay Fladley, went through his own experience with cancer about a decade ago. And even as the guy who runs the company that does the sequencing, he had trouble getting through the whole network and finding out what to do. So that's why organizations like Leal and XCures are so important.
Agree. Thank you, Dr. Hood. Thank you so much for your talk today. Very enlightening. Thank you. And empowering.
Thank you. Thank you for all your time.
Of course. Absolutely. Okay, we are moving right along. Our next presenter is Dr. Norman LaFrance. He is the Chief Medical Officer and Senior Vice President at Plus Therapeutics. And he was previously Chief Medical Officer and Senior Vice President at Jubilant Pharma Limited, and responsible for all pharma, medical, and regulatory affairs and activities. And prior to working in industry, Dr. LaFrance practiced medicine and held academic faculty appointments at Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine in the departments of medicine and radiology. We are very excited to have Dr. LaFrance speak to us today about a novel targeted radiotherapeutic for brain cancer, specifically the ReSPECT trials. Dr. LaFrance, take it away.
Thank you, Dylan, very much. And I want to echo the compliments to everyone else on, first of all, your program. I'm grateful to be included in this with some other very talented folks, but more importantly, the comments we heard at the beginning on the journey people are on. To say inspiring, I think, is an understatement. But if we can advance the slides now, and I know one of your colleagues is helping me since I'm on a device that I can't share a screen. We have the obligatory forward statements, as others have said, other speakers have mentioned. I'll be talking about an investigational product. Next slide, please. And Plus, as an organization, I just want to spend a quick second. Our platform technologies are ideal for CNS indications, and particularly CNS primary cancers. There's direct tumor targeting, which I will touch on. The availability of the items to make the product are readily available with a secure supply chain. We all know CNS cancers are a difficult area and require this type of investigation. Next slide, please. I want to compliment and call out our principal investigator, Dr. Andrew Brenner, who started this program nearly a decade ago, and emphasize how clinical trials are important. And I've heard this, through the other presentations and people's comments, and perhaps it's the obvious, but it's my way to say thank you to folks who recognize and are willing to participate, not only for the potential benefit they may have, but for their contribution to new therapies, which in CNS cancers are particularly important and required. Next slide, please. We're talking about the CNS, and this montage of CNS activity, I think, underscores that people, I think, have heard that the last medical frontier is the brain. And maybe that's a little bit of an overstatement. There are many last medical frontiers, but it emphasizes how we have to be careful that the brain is a complex organ. It's involved in everything. You have a problem there. Besides needing to deal with that problem, you have to recognize and be careful about the rest of the brain's responsibilities. Next slide, please. And we look at clinical trials, and why are new treatments important? Well, particularly in brain cancers, and thank you, Dawn, for mentioning my Hopkins heritage. I'm very proud of that, and had the good fortune to work with some very smart people. And folks like Skip Grossman, a friend of mine, recently got the Lifetime Career Award from the Society of Neuro-Oncology. Other colleagues that I worked with in the CNS cancers, particularly glioblastoma, Ben Carson, Henry Brem, Don Long, and others, were real inspirations. And in talking with them, and particularly Professor Grossman recently, we were reminiscing about the work we did, and we did some good work, and they continue to do phenomenal work. But our progress in defeating glioblastoma has been frustrating. We know a lot more about the tumor's biology, of course. It doesn't mean things haven't happened. But if we don't get into new treatments in the clinical trials, we're not going to be able to turn some of these discoveries in biology or some of the things we already know and improve upon those to make a difference. Next slide, please. So Plus, as an organization, really want to try to transform brain cancer from this poor prognosis into a manageable disease. Next slide. Everyone, I think, on the call is familiar with, how difficult this tumor is to treat. And over the decades, as treatments have evolved from surgery to adding some radiotherapy and some of the chemotherapy, there have been some incremental improvements. And in particular, radiation has been shown to make a difference. Radiation works. We know that in a lot of tumors. In my background at Hopkins, among other things, I had a lot of thyroid cancer treatments, and radiation there is known to have an important difference, up to and including a cure. But you have to get the radiation to where you need it. And radiation now in in glioblastoma, there are some very effective ways to deliver it, but that slide previously of the various brain structures, you have limitations. You certainly want to get all the radiation you can to the brain as possible, but recognizing you have to be careful and avoid off-target or normal tissue, normal brain toxicity. Next slide, please. So that brings us to our product and our trial. And the focus of this is the rhenium-186 isotope. It has a beta decay. I'm not going to get into the technical aspects of it on this presentation, of course, but we bichelate that for some stability and allows us to encapsulate that into a nanoliposome, which contributes to its delivery and to its retention at the tumor site. Next slide, please. And as you do with all new products, we had an extensive preclinical experience, a lot of information here. You'll have this as a resource document available, as Diane had mentioned at the beginning of our presentation today. But very briefly, you see that in the upper left, tumor retention, tumor response, and the survival in those three graphs are very impressive in the preclinical model and showing some imaging results of that, confirming very good preclinical, in fact, extremely promising clinical results. Based on this, next slide, consortium of folks, and I showed you Professor Brenner's picture earlier, he and his colleagues and 3 sites in Texas received NIH funding for a phase 1/2 trial, which is ongoing now. Next slide, please. And what you'll see with this is in the next few slides, what's occurred from this time forward. So the phase 1/2 trial has what you'd expect in a typical inclusion-exclusion criteria. These will be available in greater detail. It's over 18-year-old patients, although we'll be opening a pediatric trial by this summer, hopefully. And there's the other criteria there. Next slide, please. Importantly, and I'll spend just a few minutes, this trial requires the direct infusion of the encapsulated rhenium into the nanoliposome by a convection-enhanced delivery catheter, which is similar to, and these are inserted similar to a standard of care biopsy. But these convection-enhanced delivery catheters go right to the tumor, so you have a direct infusion of the drug into the tumor. And this slide outlines what's required for the treatment. So in the weeks before treatment, you have your reviewed screening, make sure that the treatment is right for you. Your physicians will review that with recent MRs, and for the catheter placement, which is already available with planning technology and MR planning, quite comparable to what many of you might have experienced in terms of the standard of care biopsy. We place 1 to 4 catheters. In fact, most recently in our dose escalation, and we'll have a slide on this coming up quickly. We've typically have now 3 or 4 catheters, and then the drug infusion takes place. It can be up to 4 hours, but often it may be 90 minutes to 2.5 hours, depending on the size of the tumor and the number of catheters we're able to place, which are all a function of the treatment planning, ensuring that we are avoiding any sensitive structures in the brain. And again, this is a well-established procedure, and any neurosurgical department certainly can take care of this. Either on the evening of that infusion, which begins maybe at 9 o'clock in the morning, for example, finishes by noon or shortly afterwards. The catheters may be removed that evening, and certainly by next morning, and you're discharged. Next slide, please. This is a very busy slide to point out. The study's been ongoing. We have nearly 30 folks, 30 patients have participated in the dose escalation. We have in one of the dose, a non-DLT dose, we've started a phase 2 for small to medium-sized tumors. That's ongoing and has nearly 6 patients entered into that trial. I won't go into these details here, but the trial is well underway and is proceeding very nicely. Next slide. Importantly, the product is very well tolerated during the procedure. The catheter placement probably is the most uncomfortable. It's a surgical procedure, so the insertions per se are well tolerated. There might be some scalp discomfort. If folks have had brain biopsies, you can probably appreciate that. And the adverse events are typically non-serious, and the few serious ones that are here were not product related. And some of these were actually pre-existing conditions. For example, lymphopenia was pre-existing before our treatment, and the cerebral edema might have been due and likely was due to too rapid a steroid treatment, steroid taper after treatment. Next slide, please. I'm going to finish up the talk by going over some examples and some of the data. Here are 3 examples. I mentioned the direct delivery. You see the MRs, and then that second image on all 3 rows there represent the SPECT image, which besides the beta particle, which is the therapeutic particle for the tumoricidal activity, there's a simultaneous gamma ray, which gives us real-time validation of where the product goes. And although I'm just giving you one image, this delivery is complete within a few hours. That 24 hours has not changed. And we have, with the investigation images, through 7 days, which shows this exact same distribution. And you can see some of the, the benefit that's occurred. Next slide, please. And here I spend, just a quick time showing the very provocative preliminary evidence of some promising efficacy. And this is reviewing the types of things we're doing in the dose escalation trial on the left, but more importantly, the overall survival curve. And this is very brief and it may be difficult to read, but then you can go into either our website or go on to Delana will have this available, as she said earlier. This is the Kaplan-Meier curve within our trial of patients who received less than 100 gray, which very early in the dose escalation, there were patients that had that lower delivery because, the phase 1s are primarily related to safety first. But radiation we know works, and we're finding even in the phase 1 dose escalation, as the dose is going up, we're getting higher dose deliveries to the tumor. And you can see in those patients who got greater than 100 gray, and this follows exactly the same results we saw in preclinical studies, which is very encouraging if we're replicating in people what we've seen in the preclinical studies. And you can see, hopefully you can see in the bottom graph, that those greater than 100 gray had a 76-week median overall survival versus those less than 100 gray with a 22-week overall survival. And those numbers, this is within our trial, but the 22 weeks is not a lot different than, say, bevacizumab or other convection enhanced delivery overall survivals in control groups, which has been typically around 30 to 32 weeks. Next slide, please. So in wrapping up, next slide, please. Another example, finally in our phase 2, you can see the brainstem, and the tumor in this location is in a very difficult, deep area, was not surgically accessible after the original surgery, obviously a recurrence. We treated this patient in the phase 2. You can see some of the MR slides, some MR images later on that have made a difference. We have good tumor coverage, 105 gray absorbed dose coverage, both of which, and in the 3 months since this patient was treated, has remained stable and actually improved nicely. So next slide. So, I'd like to end here on showing another example in the same patient of that activity. And now you see the SPECT image with that retained retention. Next slide. And so I'll turn this back over to Delan and answer any questions, but particularly if you feel this trial may be of interest to you, please contact us, talk to your physician. We're on clinicaltrials.gov. Delan can give you contact information. You saw on the beginning slide my contact information. And I'll stop here, Delan, and turn it back to you for any questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. LaFrance. One of the things that I would like you to explain to our audience, because sometimes we all use some slang, right? We all use words because we're using and talking about this all the time, right? So if you could go back and talk about CNS and what that means. I know what it means, but what does that mean to our general audience?
Seeing that, well, central nervous system, and, and in particular, they're, we're in the rare tumors of the CNS, and particularly ones that don't have really effective treatments. And glioblastoma is, I think, right at the top of that list of challenges and unmet medical needs. It's been studied a lot. I told you about my experiences with colleagues at Hopkins in the past. We did a lot of good work. They've done tremendous work since I left decades ago. And but to quoting them indirectly, it's been our frustration that we've not made the progress, particularly in glioblastoma, that we all wish we had made. We know a lot more about that disease than we did 20 and 30 years ago, but have not been able to translate that into successes, because the successes we've had, for example, the chemotherapy, well, you have diffusion issues and it doesn't stay where you put it. The convection enhanced delivery catheters are developed for that direct delivery of chemotherapy, but those molecules haven't cooperated in staying put. We've taken some of those advances, the success of radiation, but having to be careful with how radiation now is delivered, and it has to pass the normal brain. They do a good job. It makes a difference, but there are limitations of how you can use it. What we've done is encapsulate that radiation into a deliverable nanoliposome, directly deliver it to the tumor. Have shown on the slide, hopefully, and we don't have the time or detail to do that, it's durable retention in that area, so that radiation stays put, doesn't affect the normal tissues or the normal brain, and delivers its payload to the tumor and where it's needed. And for example, typical delivery, radiation deliveries, external beam radiotherapy, as an example, 30, 40, 50 gray, it has to be fractionated. It does make a difference. But once they get to those levels, they're kind of finished, because they, it's not first do no harm, but in many ways, that's exactly the philosophy. You don't want to cause more problems. You got to do all you can, but you also have to respect. Think of the slide I showed you with those, the brain activity is very complex. Areas of the brain are very radiosensitive, normal brain. And we know that radiation is tumoricidal and it works. And if you can get it where you need it, it works. And our preliminary data is showing this has real promise. And that's with a single administration. I didn't spend any time now, but our expectation is where our safety profile is so robust on this product, we're anticipating going to a multi-treatment paradigm with patients. That's to be determined, is to be reviewed with FDA. But because of what we're getting now, we're seeing that that's a real possibility. Hence the slide I showed that, it wouldn't be fair to say, oh yeah, this has potential to cure neuroblastoma. That's a little bit too bold. But if we can give this on a repetitive basis, and our data shows that we can do that, some retreatments, and it's very well tolerated, this may be one way to accomplish that.
Right. It might be a tool in the toolbox.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I know that Plus Therapeutics would like to be able to bring this clinical trial to other sites across the United States. So if there are healthcare providers listening in, and you are interested in thinking about opening this clinical trial in your site, I encourage you, please, to get a hold of Dr. LaFrance. Because again, it is all about having multiple tools in your toolbox to treat disease. So thank you. Are you at all able to, and I know some things you can't say, but the pediatric clinical trial that you're hoping to open up, are you able to share a little more information about that?
Well, and high-grade gliomas, ependymomas in kids, it'll be under 18. We'll probably start about age 6 because in an abundance of caution, there's a developing brain and usually is about as developed as it will be in terms of increased radiosensitivity by 4 or 5. So our first focus will be age 6 up to 18. And there'll be actually some overlap above 18, depending, a lot of kids have survived, say from a teenage presentation to older. So there'll be a fair amount of flexibility. There'll be high-grade glioma and ependymomas.
Wow, that's wonderful.
And we'll be talking to you and maybe getting it on your site once that gets started. Of course, it'll be on our website and it'll be on clinicaltrials.gov. So, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
If you allow me, I'm sorry. And this same product, although this is not the, for those who are involved in managing leptomeningeal metastases, this product is also in clinical trials for that via a direct administration via an intraventricular catheter or Ommaya reservoir, and that's an outpatient procedure.
Okay.
So, thank you for that. Allow me to say that.
That's very important. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have just a couple minutes. If we have any more questions for Dr. LaFrance, please ask him now.
This is Jen Ortiz, and I have a question.
Yes.
Dr. LaFrance, thank you for being here today. I'm a 2-time glio survivor, and I was curious if your current research includes DNA from the tumor as a part of that research for trials. And I ask this because I'm curious if this will play a part or a role in the outcomes for the masses when comparing the data in the future.
Yeah, that's a great question. And our current trial is not looking at that, but I'd love to hear some more from you on that. Our and it depends on if you're looking at the tumor DNA and but our leptomeningeal trial is actually looking at DNA damage from the radiation as part of a separate potential investigation. I can't go into the details on this, but my email was there, and if you'd like some more information, please communicate with me, or Delanna will certainly connect us, and I can go over into that detail.
Thank you, doctor. I appreciate
You're
your
welcome.
time.
Yeah, great question. Thank you.
We have time for one more question if it is out there. Okay, wow. Well, thank you so much for your presentation, Dr.
I appreciate the opportunity. And again, I appreciate everyone on the call, and you're all an inspiration for me. And this is a terrific presentation and day. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, it's a team effort.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Well said.
Thank you. Someone had a question, Susan, about our YouTube channel. They wanted to know what it's called. And I'm like, I never really thought about that before. What would you say?
It's End Brain Cancer.
So yeah, easy to find. End Brain Cancer.
Yeah, and I'll throw a link in the chat for everyone.
Thank you so much, Susan. Appreciate it. Okay, guys, we are ready to hear from Dr. Leo Lustgarten. And he is, he's actually somebody the End Brain Cancer Initiative team knows pretty well. But he is going to join us now and provide a presentation about the Optune device. And he is, just so you know, he has practiced in neurosurgery for 25 years. And he now serves as a medical director for Novacure. So he's a neurosurgeon, radiosurgeon, and he is going to be joining us today. Dr. Lustgarten, are you there?
Yes. Hi, Dylan. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I am. I am indeed.
Great to see you.
No, it's a pleasure seeing you again. So I'm ready when you are.
Okay. Give us a minute.
Yes, of course.
You should be all set to share your screen.
Okay, so can you hear me okay? That's the first question.
Yes.
And second, please let me know if you can see my slides in presentation mode.
They're fantastic.
Perfect, perfect. So I'll start. I don't want to delay anything in your schedule. So first thing first, Dylan, Susan, Sean, and team, good morning and good afternoon, not only to you, to everyone who's an audience in this fantastic meeting. I wanted to thank you and the End Brain Cancer for the invitation and also for allowing us to share a few minutes to talk about Tumor Treating Fields. Again, it is both a privilege and an honor to be here and sharing all this information with you. So I shall probably start by saying that this idea came from the brilliant mind of Professor Yoram Palti. He's a physiologist and biophysicist from the Technion Institute in Israel. And as you will see in the following slides, I know some people in the call have been already exposed to Tumor Treating Fields or know about it, but some of you have not heard of it. So I'll go a little bit to basics. But anyhow, this is something that was unheard of at the time when he came up with this invention and this innovative concept. Needless to say, and you know that comes along whenever you have a bright idea or an out-of-the-box idea, those ideas always come with criticism, skepticism, and probably, you know, most at the time, I can say that most scientists and colleagues told him he was crazy and he would fail. Well, he actually proved them all wrong. So to give you a perspective, this came at a time where the only treatment alternatives that we had for glioblastomas were actually surgery, radiotherapy, or drugs. And when I mean drugs, I mean chemotherapy. At the time, basically, there were no targeted therapies, monoclonal antibodies. So there were very rudimentary types of chemotherapy. This was even before temozolomide came along and was actually approved by the FDA. So this was kind of a very innovative idea at the time. I myself can tell you I was fascinated with this idea when I first read about it in a journal, in neurosurgical article in 2012 or 2013, and I thought this was going to be revolutionary. I actually never thought I was going to end up working in a company. So let's dive a little bit into what it is. So for those of you who've never heard of it, tumor treating fields are basically low intensity, intermediate frequency, alternating electric fields that essentially what they do, they interfere with biological processes inside the cells. So if you imagine all of our cells are full of electrically charged particles, proteins, organelles. So delivering electrical fields makes perfect sense that you will create some sort of distress on these cells. And the first mechanism of action that was actually studied, and I would say that it's the mostly well-known, is the mitotic effect. So meaning mitosis is basically the way the cells replicate. So cancer cells, by default, they replicate very rapidly. So the way this device is set up and the settings only interfere with these cancer cells, and they do not interfere with normal healthy tissue. That is very important. The other important thing is that this is a local regional therapy, so it is only applied where the tumor is. In this case, is the scalp in the head. And just to give you a little bit of perspective, it has been approved by the FDA in 2011 for recurrent glioblastomas, and then in 2015 for newly diagnosed glioblastomas. And we also have another indication, which is malignant pleural mesothelioma. This was what we call a humanitarian device exemption approval by the FDA. So you can see here that it's not only working for glioblastomas, but it's also working, and we have shown that in different preclinical research that it also works for different cell lines. So electric fields is not really electricity, and that might be a little bit confusing, even though most people use it interchangeably. But as you can see here in the graph, we have three different types of fields, and I would like you to see this particular graphic because it's very nice. We have gravitational fields, so you know gravity, it's there. We don't see it, it's invisible, but we know it actually exerts forces on masses, and that's why they actually fall, and we have the typical example of the apple. Then we also have the magnetic fields, which again, they exert forces on iron and other magnets. And then we have electric fields, which essentially are fields of force, and what they do is they drive electrically charged particles from one place to the other. And that's what electrical fields are. And they are also different than other types of therapy. So as you can see here with the drugs usually you have to take a drug and then it will reach a peak in your blood levels, and then it starts decreasing, and before it actually comes back to the normal, you have to take it over again and again in a certain frequency in order to maintain levels, therapeutic levels. With radiotherapy, as you know, we have to apply radiotherapy daily. And again, radiotherapy affects both healthy and non-healthy tissue, but we are allowing, the reason for applying this every day for several weeks is to allow the healthy cells to recover from the damage. But then you have tumor treating fields that has no half-life, so it's not a drug, and you don't apply it like radiotherapy, like once a day in a dose. Tumor treating fields basically works as long as the device is on. So it's kind of a turn on, turn off, like a radio. You turn on the radio, and then once you don't want to hear radio anymore, you turn it off. It's very similar to that. So the device and the treatment, the tumor treating fields are only working as long as the device is on. For those of you, you might be wondering, well, electrical fields in medicine. Well, it has been in the market for many years in different types of medical devices. As you can see here in this graph, cardiac pacemakers, they work with electrical fields. There is a huge difference into what you can see here in the graph. So we have what we call the low frequency medical devices, such as a heart cardiac pacemaker. And what makes the difference is that they actually work at a frequency where they can excite muscle and nerves, but they don't affect anything else. And that's why they work so perfectly well at that setting. And on the other spectrum, you have the very high frequency devices, such as the ablation devices, and they create a lot of heat. So tumor treating fields, the settings, the fact that they are low intensity, intermediate frequency, they have been tested, and they are finely tuned to only affect unhealthy tissue or cancer cells, but they do not affect normal healthy tissue. And the other thing is that they are high enough not to excite muscle or nerves, but low enough in frequency in order to avoid heat. So it's kind of the perfect setting to affect glial cells. The other important thing that I wanted to mention about tumor treating fields is that we have, for years, we have spoken about the anti-mitotic effect. So remember, what tumor treating fields does essentially is that once you start applying these alternating electrical fields via two pairs of arrays, so they work in pairs, and what they do is they basically, once you have the device on, the electrical field alternates from one array to the other, and this happens at 200,000 times per second. That's what 200 kilohertz means. And what they do is that the way they work, they align certain electrically charged particles in the same field of the electrical field, and in that way they disrupt mitosis. So the cells that are dividing, they arrest the division, or they stop it, and then the cells end up dying. And that's the way it works as an anti-mitotic effect. The fact of having two pairs of arrays is that because we don't know spatially and three-dimensionally the way the cells will be dividing in which position, in this way, by applying two different electrical fields on the same patient with two pairs of arrays, we're trying to capture as many dividing cells as possible in order to be more effective. But we've known that for many, many years. But the more we research, the more we know about it. And we now have discovered so many other mechanisms of action that we know are in place. Like, for example, that we already know as well that tumor treating fields alters and damages the DNA, but not also it damages the DNA, it damages the way the DNA is repaired. And this is why we are combining tumor treating fields with radiotherapy in our clinical trials, because we think that that combination is synergistic. Again, this is ongoing investigation, but we also know that tumor treating fields affects the cell membrane permeability. It makes it more permeable. It also affects a process called autophagy. It somehow hinders the capacity of the cells to migrate or to invade. And also it has an effect on the immune system of the microenvironment in the tumor itself. So it enhances an immune response, which we can potentially use with immune checkpoint inhibitors or certain drugs in order to be more effective in terms of treatment. So as you can see, if I had done this presentation maybe 10 years ago, I would have probably talked about only the anti-mitotic effect, so the effect on the replication of the cells. But now, as the years go by, we already know that there are more and more mechanisms of action. And not only that, I'm probably sure that if Dylan and team invite me in 3 years' time, we will probably have 5 more mechanisms of action that we're actually discovering almost every day. And this is fascinating. And again, as I told you, if you think about this, if you think about the cells being electrically charged particles, they have molecules, proteins, organelles, anything that delivers or applies any electrical field on them will cause some sort of distress. So this is just a nice illustration as to the whole device. It might seem overwhelming, but again, the patient doesn't have to carry all of that. And I'm happy I can see Patty here and other patients and Tori, their tumor treating fields users. So you can see that in this illustration, you can see how the device is usually carried by the patient. And again, this is what a normal patient looks like wearing the device. So the arrays are applied in the scalp, the head needs to be shaved, and the patient can actually carry on with a rather normal life. I wanted to stress a point before ending my presentation that by being local regional, this is an extremely important point. By being local regional, it means that the arrays are placed very specifically where the tumor is, meaning that we can somehow modify the position of the arrays depending on where the tumor is. So if the glioblastoma is actually more frontally located, you will see that the arrays will be shifted a little bit towards the front or towards the back if it were an occipital one. And this is given by the MRI. So the MRIs of the patients are introduced into a special software that we use that will somehow come out with a particular, an individual array for every patient. Even though there is a default array, most patients get, I would say the vast majority, an individualized array layout for them. And the other important thing before I forget, being local regional, is that we have not seen any systemic adverse events from tumor treating fields. The only adverse events related with the device is, as you can probably imagine, is skin adverse events. So I would say that between 45 to 50% of patients will develop some sort of grade 1 or grade 2 dermatitis. Again, usually very easy to manage, or at least it's manageable. Very rarely we see grade 3 and grade 4s. And again, if a patient is obviously having some skin issues, that can be arranged, it can be treated, and the arrays can also be modified in order to avoid either hardware placed in the patient when the craniotomy was replaced, or trying to avoid obviously wounds from the scan incision. But the other important thing is, when I mentioned that it doesn't cause any systemic adverse events, is this means that, as you well know, some of our chemotherapeutic drugs are extremely toxic. They create a lot of adverse events, systemic adverse events. So with tumor treating fields, you can, even if you have severe toxicity from the medication, you can still use tumor treating fields because it does not affect your blood levels. And this is especially important for those patients where, unfortunately, we wipe out their bone marrows with toxicity. These patients can still keep using tumor treating fields. I think this is the last slide of the presentation, so I'll pause here and I'll take any questions. I hope I kept my time perfectly on time.
You did great. Thank you, Dr. Lustgarten. I would love to open it up. There are actually several patients today joining us that are using the Optune device and the TT Fields delivery system. They don't often get an opportunity to talk directly to you, so I'm going to be quiet and let them have a chat with you, and then I actually have a question for you.
Absolutely. Do I keep my presentation, or do you want me to keep it just in case someone has a question from any of the slides?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, you bet.
Perfect.
Okay, actually, I'm going to move your presentation because you know what? I would like the person who is going to ask you a question for you to see them.
Perfect. Yeah, I agree. Thank you. So I stopped sharing.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have? Go ahead.
Jen has a question, of course. Hi, doctor. Thank you for being here. And the Optune has been something I've been wearing since November of 2020. And I believe that's what's extended my life. The question I have is, I'm aware every month I download data for indicating the usage time as a patient, how long I've been wearing the Optune for that month. I'm curious if NovaCare is looking at data for the amount of cancer cells that were impacted while the patient is using the Optune.
Wow. Again, that's a fantastic question. And you actually reminded me of something really important that you just mentioned. So we know that using tumor treating fields at least 12 hours, we already know due to our research that we already have an overall survival benefit. But we know that if we, and this is the reason why we encourage our patients to wear it, not 12 hours, 18 hours per day, because that is an independent prognostic factor, meaning that if you reach those 18 hours, your overall survival benefit will improve significantly. And it only gets more and more the more you use it. So meaning the more hours you use it above 18, the more the survival benefit. And that's something that we have in our data. And the fact that you're probably that we actually track the Optune usage is basically that, because we're interested in knowing if a patient is not reaching out that goal. We obviously need to know what's going on. Maybe you know, some issues need to be addressed, and that's the reason why the usage is so important to us. Regarding to your question, wow, it is, I would say it is almost impossible to know how many cells are actually impacted. I mean, as you know, tumors are consisting of millions of cells. I can tell you from molecular biology, and this is something that one of my bosses during my training taught me. So we know we have 10 to the 11 cells in a tumor. So imagine a glioblastoma measures 4 to 5 centimeters in average when they're diagnosed. They actually weigh about 100 grams. Again, this is kind of a rough estimate. We know that the cells are in the 10 to the 11 magnitude. With surgery, and being extremely radical with surgery, we get that 10 to the 11 to 10 to the 9. So meaning we do what we call a logarithmic murdering of cells. That's kind of a term.
Yes.
But you can tell by
I
then.
say eradicate, not murder.
Exactly.
Cells.
Sure.
So that's I have to push that on my husband, who thinks I'm making that up. So I appreciate you saying murder. I will tell him.
Yeah, no, but you're right. It should be right. But what I'm trying to say is that even if we do the most radical surgery, unfortunately, we know we're leaving disease behind. We know that we're leaving cells, millions of cells. And that's the reason why after surgery, after being very aggressive with surgery, we still need to hit those cells with radiotherapy, chemotherapy, tumor treating fields, and whatever is available there. And as you can see, and if we actually thought about the timeline of treatments, Unfortunately, we've moved very slowly in treatments. In the 1970s, we only had lomustine and permustine. When I trained in the late 1990s, temozolomide was there, but it was not approved for glioblastomas. It was approved only for oligodendrogliomas and anaplastic astrocytomas. It was only approved in 2005. And again, we have very limited options, not because we're not doing research. This is just a very difficult enemy, but this is what we're here for.
If anyone doesn't mind, can I ask a follow-up question? I call my Optune the newborn because you can't leave home without it and you have to carry it everywhere you go. Do you see advances in making it, the rumor on the streets for us NovaCare users, Optune, is that it's going to be the size of a cell phone. Do you see any progress in making the machine smaller?
Yes, well, yes. I can tell you there are very brilliant minds behind innovation. So what I learned from the company, and again, I'm a clinician and I've worked in the OR all of my life, but what I learned from this company, first of all, patient forward is their motto and they take it seriously. And we're only talking about science here, but there is a department working on many things. Again, as you say, bringing the generator. Well, we brought back the generator in the first clinical trials were kind of a VHS machine. I'm not sure if you are old enough to remember Betamax. Well, now they're only 1 kilogram, 1.2. The arrays have been, modified. So yes, we're moving forward to new innovations, both in coming with the generator, which is lighter and smaller, and with different arrays. Even, we're obviously thinking of implantable arrays at some point, but it's not an easy concept. So again, these are all concepts and ideas, and unfortunately, bringing an idea such as this to a clinical practice might take another 10 years or 15 years, but hopefully we're moving forward with that.
Thank you,
sir. I'm
Dr.
just very
Lester.
grateful for the machine.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Jen, for those good questions. So I wanted to be sure everyone knew if they can see it in the chat section or not. If you have questions that you want to ask a physician who works for NovaCure, you can email them at pinfo@novacure.com. There's been some really good questions that are actually directed to you, Dr. Lustgarten, that have happened on our chat, but we are out of time. I'm so sorry. But I know that there's a lot of comments that people would like to talk to NovaCure about. So again, it's P as in physician, pinfo@novacure.com. Thank you so much, Dr. Lustgarten.
Dylan, thank you so much for the opportunity. And again, it was a pleasure being surrounded by all of these colleagues and patients. And again, we're here to support you anytime.
Thank you so much. Very important. And, I just wanted to say too, if people don't know, the, Optune device is the very, very first device that was FDA approved for basically GBM. And so when we start thinking about that, NovaCure opened the door to really for technology for brain cancer to be used to treat brain cancer. And there's several devices that are actually up and coming as well. And I think NovaCure you inspired them to do that. Thank you.
No, thank you.
So ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce to you our next speaker. Her name is Ashley Bridwell, and Ashley is the program coordinator, outpatient neurological rehab, Barrows Neurological Institute, and as the coordinator and co-founder of the nation's first program to address traumatic brain injury in the domestic violence population, Ashley has dedicated her career as a social worker to address and bring awareness to traumatic brain injury in vulnerable populations through community and direct clinical care. Ashley has a unique perspective as a licensed master social worker and a brain tumor survivor. She was diagnosed with an astrocytoma as a young adult, has undergone surgery and treatment, and lives with neurological deficits. And she has a slide deck. I am wondering if we have that. Here it is. Ashley, we are really excited to learn from you, and thank you for being here today.
Hello, it's my pleasure. Gosh, what a great day so far. Lots of really interesting information, and I am thrilled to be a part of this incredibly brilliant panel of speakers you've got, Delanne. Geez, I'm feeling myself right now. This is awesome. Okay, so I'm driving blind a little bit. I can't see myself, but I can see you, so I feel like we're okay. So I'm Ashley Bridwell. I am a social worker at Barrow Neurological Institute, where the Ivy Brain Tumor Center lives. I am so privileged to be amongst other survivors and people that are just fighting so incredibly hard, and we are warriors. So I'm going to be with Barrow Outpatient Neuro Rehab for 19 years on June 6th. Holy buckets, how did that happen? I feel like I just started yesterday. So I've really been able to see so much growth and technology and new treatments for brain tumor disease, as well as for neurorehabilitation services following oftentimes brain tumor surgeries, resections, VP shunts, all kinds of neurosurgical interventions for things related to brain tumor disease outside of just the initial resection. So I am going to talk a little bit today about outpatient neuro rehab and kind of, or actually neuro rehab sort of in general, to include inpatient rehab as well. So, but first I like to share some information about my very favorite person in all of the world. Let's see here. Me. When I was 19 years old on March 3rd, 1999, I had an MRI, and you're looking at it right now. And for the neuro docs in the room, you can see why I have a left field cut. And so I had a variety of symptoms for a couple of years: headaches, discoordination, eye twitching, hand trembling. I was a waitress at Denny's. And so after I dropped one too many skillets, you know, those heavy skillets that the egg scrambles come in, they told me that I really needed to see a doctor. And so I thought I was actually had a mental health situation. So I went to a psychiatrist, and it was the first doctor that I had seen that listened to me for a full 45 minutes. And she heard all of my symptoms and everything that was going on. And she looked at me and she said, you know, I think you maybe need a neurologist for some of this. And at 19, I was definitely not going to the neurologist. I was going to take a couple Advil and, you know, just do my thing. And that doctor had a spidey sense that I was not going to go to the neurologist. And she definitely put her license on the line by contacting my emergency contact, who was my mom. And she said that, you know, I had these issues and that she wanted her to facilitate me seeing a doctor. And so once my mom knew, right, like I had one, I don't know, the next day. And so as a result, I was diagnosed with a pilocytic astrocytoma in my right frontotemporal lobe. At the time when they saw the imaging, the neurosurgeons were convinced it was a GBM because of its size and its shape and because of my age. A juvenile polycytic astrocytoma is typically a tumor that lives in pediatric patients only. So I didn't realize that I was just like, you know, I thought I was just immature. Turns out, you know, my brain was actually, I'm kidding. That was a bad brain tumor joke. Okay. Jen, I think earlier in the talk today, you were referencing your humor, and I'm right there with you. Humor is super important. So I had a craniotomy, I had a burr hole evacuation, I had a VP shunt installed, and then I had it removed. As a result of all of the neurosurgical interventions, I did develop a dystonia, which is a movement disorder that essentially makes your muscles tense all the time. So it's like when you're showing somebody your biceps, you're inviting them to the gun show, right? You know, and you free tickets to the gun show. So when I flex when you flex your muscles, that's what my entire left side feels like all the time. So I do get Botox injections for my left upper extremity every 12 weeks to manage that spasticity. So I like to joke these days that my left side is just for show. And sometimes learning how to talk about your limitations and issues is important so that you can effectively articulate to friends and family, you know, what you're experiencing. And so over the years, I've really tried to make things as easy to understand as possible for the people around me. So saying that my arm and most of my leg is just for show, you know, kind of people laugh a little bit and it kind of lightens up the whole deal. So the picture of the staples, I like to include that picture in my presentations just because it's the only time I've ever had a mohawk in my life. And I am super glad that I got to live in a lifetime where I could rock a mohawk and bleach it blonde. You know, these very important questions to my neurosurgeon after my last surgery was, can I get tan and can I bleach my hair? Because I was 19 and I was in college, and those were important items to check in with. So I had staples and the horseshoe incision there is my initial surgery. So I like to show this picture because I was at a coffee shop one day with these staples in my head, and one of my college buddies walked over to me and they're like, dude, where did you get that piercing? It's like super rad. So it's not a piercing, it's those are staples. But so, you know, I like to say that I have a little bit of street cred. So I am a firm believer in the, gosh, how important family is. And when we talk about rehabilitation and we talk about moving forward with our lives, in the almost 20 years I've been in the social work field, what I know is how many people in my office during the initial orientation session for their rehabilitation is pretty indicative of how well they're going to do. It's and maybe it's not a number thing, it's the quality of the caregiver support is just remarkable in terms of outcomes and certainly quality of life and comfort and all of that stuff. So I am so grateful that this is my team. These are my people. These are the people that got me through 4 brain surgeries my sophomore year of college and made sure that I knew that I was still worthy and deserving and good. So so my little brother and my mom there, so obviously 1999, you'll note my 1999 pager on my jeans there. No, I wasn't a drug dealer. That was just how we talked to each other back in the late 90s. So the most recent picture is on my left side. So that little boy got to be 30 years old. I don't know how the heck that happened either, but he has an MBA and is living in Tel Aviv and working at a startup. And he is just my favorite human ever. And my mom, of course, is my heart. And she was a pit bull. I mean, she opened doors that I didn't even know existed. And so to any caregivers on the call today, thank you so much for supporting your survivors, because man, I can attest, I am a terrible patient. But I'm a great social worker. So I think that's maybe how it works. But you know, I just wanted to put a note in here about the importance of family support or friend support or whoever your chosen family is, how crucial it is to have those folks with you, beside you, in front of you, behind you, the whole deal. So these are my team members. So getting into kind of the meat of the presentation, when we talk about brain injury, we don't always associate brain injury with brain tumor disease. Some of us think about, you know, traumatic brain injury as far as car accidents or falls or assaults. But when we think about neurosurgery, right, and taking, you know, the tumor out and hopefully not having to sacrifice a whole lot of good brain tissue and hopefully not a lot of scar tissue, but there is you know, there are things that have to happen so that you can continue to fight this disease. And so oftentimes we see people with effects from the injury to their brain that the neurosurgical intervention created, or something, you know, in surgery or after surgery. Also, just long-term effects of radiation chemotherapy can do a number on your ability to function as well. So, so I like to think about brain injury as affecting us in 3 separate categories: physical, cognitive, and emotional. So when we talk about brain injury and those components of impact, you know, we have to ask ourselves, well, how do we work with those issues? And so, well, that's a great question, guys, because these are some of the options. So if you have weakness, if you have spasticity, if you have visual changes, if you have cognitive changes, if you're emotionally labile, there's so many things that can happen as a result of a brain tumor surgery or a brain tumor in general. And if it's inoperable, depending on where it is, or too eloquent, you know, you can see impact from the different parts of the brain. So the according therapies are, and this is, my focus is outpatient rehab, just because that's where I live, is an outpatient neuro rehab. But important to note that if you're hospitalized, there is inpatient neuro rehab options as well that you can explore, that are 3 hours of therapy per day for 5 to 6 days per week. The Barrow Neuro Rehab at St. Joe's is pretty popular, and I have been fortunate enough to care for quite a few brain tumor disease survivors and their families over the past almost 20 years. I think, and don't quote me on this, but the last time I heard, we did the most brain tumor surgeries in the world. So physical therapy services in the neuro rehab setting is mostly focused on balance. It's focused on walking. It's focused on really the most independent you can be with mobility, whether that's with a walker, with a cane, with a, you know, other type of mobility device. And physical therapy also will work on seating and positioning. If there is a need for a wheelchair for long-term community ambulation, or, you know, for all ambulatory needs, the physical therapy team can help do a seat mapping so that you have good pressure on your bottom, so we don't have to worry about any skin related issues. Occupational therapy in the Neuro Rehabilitation Center typically focuses on the upper extremity movements, the visual movements, as well as activities of daily living. So that's bathing, dressing, grooming, toileting, basic hygiene, as well as the instrumental activities of daily living, which are medication management, household management, planning a grocery list, grocery shopping, cooking, some higher level activities of daily living. And then lastly, but certainly not leastly, is our speech therapy rehabilitation specialist, who at first glance, when you hear speech therapy, I get this a lot. People say, well, there's nothing wrong with my speech. I'm totally articulate. Yes. And in the neuro rehab setting, we typically use our speech therapists to provide cognitive retraining services. So that's looking at any part of the cognitive skills that are impacted by the injury to the brain, either from the tumor, the treatment, or the surgery. So the things like memory, attention, concentration, speed of processing, all of those executive functioning skills that can be affected. So when we talk about rehabilitation, the question is, you know, what is the role of rehabilitation? Is it that we are working on, for example, if you have a weak arm or a flaccid arm or a spastic arm as a result of a neurosurgical intervention or tumor or treatment, you know, initially we will try and re-educate those muscles, right? We'll try and teach those muscles how to do their thing again over and over and over and over again. So basically neuromuscular re-education is re-educating muscles through therapist guided training and repetition. So it's reteaching those muscles what to do. So neuromuscular re-education is typically where everybody wants to start, as far as re-educating the muscle groups so that you can walk or utilize your arm or your hand again. And we certainly will start there with you. At some point, even maybe during that time, we will look at compensatory strategies for you as well. So that might not mean regaining the use, but it may be utilizing compensatory strategies for certain things that you can't do. So workarounds, and I'm a big fan of workarounds. Compensatory strategies can be anything from using kitchen equipment. You know, I have a really cool, I call it my Swedish cutting board, and it's got a nail that sticks up right from the bottom, and it's got a little lip on the side. And so whenever I'm cutting vegetables for my salads, because the left side is just for show, I just stick that onion right on that nail, and it becomes a one-handed activity. And if I'm buttering bread, right, I stick that little piece of bread in the lip, and then I start buttering it, and just hangs out right there so that I'm not chasing it all over the countertop. So that's essentially the two different focuses that we look at with rehabilitation is the neuromuscular reeducation versus the compensatory strategies or the workarounds.
Ashley, this is
Yeah.
Leanne. I have found your talk very educational. Thank you so much. And we all need this education. I do have a neurosurgeon who's speaking next, standing by, and he's scheduled to speak right now. Is it possible to kind of put you on hold for a moment and have him jump in here to speak? Is that okay?
Absolutely, of course, yes.
Okay, so
By
I'm
all
looking.
means.
Thank you. And I have some great questions I want to ask you, but I need to jump in and let Dr. Jay McCracken speak, as well as Dr. David Andrews. And then we will come back if that's all right with you.
Let's see. I'm sorry to be so
It's
casual
okay.
here, but I have another meeting will it be before 2:15?
Let's see, we're on the same time zone right now, aren't we?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I think
Right.
so.
All right.
So,
As long
okay.
as I can get to another Zoom channel by
Okay.
2:15, you got me.
You were going to make it happen. Yes,
Okay.
we will. Okay. All right. We will see you in just a little bit.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for understanding. I appreciate that.
We got to work together.
We sure do. So we're going to come back to you because fascinating talk. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce you right now to Dr. McCracken. He is a board certified neurosurgeon. He is fellowship trained in neurosurgery oncology from Emory University and is currently the co-director at Piedmont Atlanta Brain Tumor Center. He was an early adopter of gamma-tile and is now instrumental in conducting several gamma-tile clinical studies. And again, Piedmont Brain Tumor Center is located in Atlanta, Georgia. And he, again, is going to talk about gamma-tile therapy, and specifically, he's going to talk about a clinical trial they have called START, S-T-A-R-T. And I am hopeful that Dr. McCracken is joining us.
I'm here.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
There you are. Good to see you, and thank you so much for coming to talk to us today.
You're welcome. I'm happy to do it. Well, let me share my screen, if you don't mind. All right, can you all see that?
Give us a minute. There we go.
All right, very good. So thank you so much for having me.
Of course.
My name is Jay McCracken. I'm a neurosurgical oncologist here in Atlanta, Georgia. And I'm really here to talk about our experience with gamma-tile as it relates to treatment of brain tumors. And so if you have questions, please stop me. I have some pictures and videos, and so hopefully this will be a great experience for you guys. So I won't belabor this too much, but everybody knows the scope of malignant brain tumors, which is what we are aimed at treating. In general, the most common things are brain metastases, gliomas, and malignant meningiomas. Just to give you sort of an idea of the incidence, metastases, over 100,000 new patients a year. And those occur from breast, lung, colon, renal, melanoma, everything you could imagine. High-grade gliomas, of course, the most common is a glioblastoma, which is 3.5 patients per 100,000, so over 11,000 new cases a year in the United States. And then meningiomas, thankfully, the vast majority are benign, but the ones that we are aimed at treating are either atypical, which are WHO grade 2, or malignant, which are WHO grade 3. And so what is GammaTile? Where does this come in? Some of you may have heard of it. We have patients who come see us all the time specifically asking for and looking for GammaTile. It is a relatively new therapy, which was initially approved by the FDA in 2018 for all types of any recurrent intracranial tumors. So it was sort of tumor tissue agnostic. And then in 2019, it got an additional designation for the upfront treatment of newly diagnosed malignant brain tumors. So you can use it for GBM metastases in the upfront setting as well. It's a very small collagen tile. You can see there's pictures of it. It's a 2 centimeter by 2 centimeter tile, about the size of a quarter, actually. It's bioresorbable, so that actual white piece will actually biodegrade over time. But within it, there are 4 small titanium seeds which contain a radiation source called cesium-131. And what happens is that after you have done a surgical resection of a brain tumor, no matter what kind of brain tumor it may be, we then implant and line the cavity with these tiles so that radiation starts working immediately to sort of treat any remaining tumor cells which are left behind. This allows for immediate treatment of tumor, especially in somebody who's going to need some type of adjuvant or external beam radiation. It allows us to immediately identify the areas because as anybody who's planned any sort of post-operative radiation, sometimes planning the cavities can be very difficult. It minimizes the dose of radiation to the normal brain and ensures really an excellent compliance for the patients. And one of the best things about it is that most patients do not have to come back for any sort of other form of external beam radiation after that. So it's kind of a one-stop shop for a lot of patients. This is a sort of a cross-section about what they look like. And so in there, you can see the small dots. Those are actually where the titanium seeds are located. They are structurally offset from the actual surface where they're placed. And so when these are placed together, and we typically place them end to end, we don't typically overlap them. They are designed to achieve a 60 gray dose of radiation. And some of you who have either treated or experienced glioblastoma, that is the same dose that we prescribe for glioblastoma patients. And typically that's delivered over 30 fractions or 6 weeks of radiation. This is the same dose that is delivered within the surgical cavity at the time of surgery over a period of 6 weeks, but without having to come back for external treatment. And so these radiation sources have a half-life of about 10 days, which means that over about 6 weeks, 95% of the dose has been delivered. To give you an idea about what a radiation plan looks like after these are implanted. So on the left, you can see just a simple CAT scan. In the CAT scan, you can see the small seeds within the cavity. That's what they look like. And in the middle picture, you can actually see what the radiation dose looks like compared to the rest of the brain in that cavity. In comparison, a standard external beam radiation therapy plan is shown there on the far right. And you can see how much radiation dose is actually delivered to the entire sort of right parietal and occipital lobe, as well as some of the left parietal lobe with the standard external beam therapy plan. So one of the wonderful things about this therapy is that it really minimizes the external dose to the other parts of the brain and allows for other parts of the brain to be treated with other radiation if needed in the future. So we talked about what it's indicated for. The key considerations that we think about when we're talking about these patients or if they're a good candidate, obviously they have to be a good candidate for surgery. We typically want to make sure that the tumor is resectable. We typically don't do these in patients who just get a biopsy. And I personally look for, can the tumor either be removed completely or almost completely? If you feel like you can only remove a portion of it or half of it, this really is not a good therapy. Obviously, the tumor has to be operable. Do they need radiation? And one of the biggest things that I felt that this is a tremendous help with are patients who either have transportation issues. So they either cannot make it back and forth to external beam radiation plans. They're going to have follow-up or compliance issues. So we have a lot of patients in Georgia that we lose after they've been treated once and we never hear back from them. And so this sort of ensures built-in compliance. So we know after they get their surgery, they're absolutely going to get their radiation, and we don't have to worry about them coming back to get their 6 weeks of radiation. Additionally, this is also fantastic for patients who come in and they're already maybe, very severely neurologically devastated. They can't move their arm and leg because the tumor is affecting them, and we know they're going to have to go to rehab. In general, especially in Georgia, if patients go to rehab, they cannot go back and forth for radiation. And so oftentimes there's a significant delay in getting therapy. So if somebody has to go to rehab for 2-3 months after surgery, that prevents them from getting radiation, which is typically not standard of care. And so being able to give them radiation and then go to rehab is a tremendous benefit. And so I'm just going to show one patient example because I know I only have about 10 minutes, but we've used these in every tumor tissue you could imagine. This is just a example of a lady with a recurrent metastatic breast cancer. Started her journey in 2016. Prior to seeing us, she had had 3 separate rounds of single fraction radiosurgery to 5 different lesions within the brain. When she finally came to see us in January of 18, she had a new left cerebellar metastasis that we treated with gamma knife radiation only. This progressed to a very large lesion, and then we ultimately took her to surgery to remove this. Standard of care is to give her post-op radiation, and she got a 13 fraction treatment. And then this progressed once again in 2020. And so this was actually the first patient that we treated. And so on the left, you can see this is an axial cut of her MRI, which shows this very large metastasis in the cerebellum, abutting and adjacent to the brainstem. It's attached to the undersurface of the tentorium. And so this is a very nasty tumor. And honestly, the radiation oncologist felt like she did not have any further radiation options. And so he said, this is really the only thing we have left to treat her. And so we took her back to surgery. Thankfully, we were able to remove the entire tumor at the time of surgery. And then we implanted 6.5 gamma tiles in her. This is actually her video, and I'll just preface this by saying if somebody is maybe a little squeamish, then you may want to hang tight for a minute. But this is just to show you what the gamma tiles look like when they're implanted. So this is actually looking, this is through our microscope at the patient's brain. The tumor has been removed. And so now we are going to line the normal cavity, so the normal brain that we know has brain metastasis cells still in it. There's still stuff that we cannot physically see. So these tiles are they're wetted. They're easily placed with just a simple bayoneted forceps. We typically don't wear lead shielding. We don't wear special lead gloves. The radiation dose fall off is so quick, you really don't need to protect yourself in the operating room. And so these tiles are just placed sort of side by side, end to end within the cavity. And remember, all of them have 4 separate radiation seeds within them. And so that allows for a very conformal dose, very even spacing of the radiation. And we just sort of place these until there's really no more room. The trick for us is typically figuring out how many tiles to order beforehand, because you do have to order them beforehand. So typically we err on the side of ordering more and then using less if we need them. But ultimately they're very easy to place. And then we just close like we normally would from a surgical standpoint. This is her postoperative picture showing basically what the radiation dose looks like in that area. The red is actually the 60 gray line, so the same dose that she would have gotten for a glioblastoma dose, but delivered over 6 weeks internally, as opposed to having to come back and getting a external dose over 30 treatments. And this patient actually did miraculously well. She lived for well over a year without any progression in the brain, and then ultimately succumbed to her systemic disease. But this was truly a win for this patient who really had no other options. So our series includes about a little over 50 patients. So we have 52 patients. The vast majority are metastases, 30 either newly diagnosed or recurrent glioblastoma. We just hit our 3-year mark. So our first patient was in 2020. From a brain metastasis standpoint, we've not had any local recurrence. So anything within the initially treated resection cavity. We've had a significantly delayed progression in all of our high-grade gliomas, so 6 to 12 months more than what we typically would have expected after a recurrence. We've not had any progression in malignant meningioma patients. This is more from a surgical standpoint, but we've had, there's a concept called radiation necrosis in patients who have previously already had radiation dose. And so sometimes it's very difficult to tell if it's truly recurrent tumor versus necrosis. And so we've had 5 cases that we took to surgery that ultimately ended up just being a necrotic lesion. And so we don't implant gamatile on top of that to make the necrosis worse. This can cause radiation necrosis or inflammation of the brain secondary to almost too much radiation. That's typically people have had many doses of radiation in the past. And out of our patients, we've had 4 that have experienced that. 1 wound infection and 1 spinal fluid leak. And so from a surgical complication standpoint, it's actually well within the normal, sort of realm of surgical complications. And so we've actually been very pleased with this therapy, and our patients have really done well with it. There are 3 active trials going on and 1 that's about to come on. The first one is actually a feasibility study called Gestalt. Gestalt is it's basically an upfront treatment of glioblastoma. And so this is one that I'm truly excited about. It's some of you may have heard of the STOOP protocol, which is after surgical resection. It's 6 weeks of radiation plus temozolomide. This is trying to jumpstart that whole process. So as opposed to waiting the 4 weeks after surgery to start radiation, we take the tumor out, we put the gamatiles in, the patients then wait 4 weeks and they get an abbreviated dose of radiation as opposed to the full 6 weeks. And so the hope here is to see, does this prevent progression earlier? And are the patients able to tolerate this? And so ultimately, this will likely progress into a full-fledged clinical trial. Next is the Rhodes study, which is a randomized controlled trial for brain metastases. And so patients are either randomized into resection plus gamatile or resection plus standard of care postoperative radiosurgery, and then to compare the results. And the hope is that the incidence of both radiation necrosis and leptomeningeal disease that can happen after brain metastases resection is lower, and local control is as good, if not better, with the gamatile. There's a new study coming out that's going to be for recurrent GBM. And so we don't have the final details on that, but there will be a 3rd study for recurrent glioblastoma. And then we also have a registry study, which basically looks at anybody implanted with gamatile, whether it was meningioma, upfront or recurrent GBM, upfront or recurrent metastases. All these patients are then monitored sort of in a real world fashion moving forward to see how well they do. So I'll stop there and take questions if anybody has any.
Thank you, Dr. McCracken. That was amazing. I want to compliment you on your slides as well. Those are really great looking slides and easy to understand. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a quick question. Actually, it's not really a question. Can you explain again your point about gamatile radiation and rehabilitation? Can you explain that again? That's really important.
Yeah. So, we have a lot of patients who come to us and they're already pretty severely debilitated. They've not had an arm that works for 4 weeks and they just haven't gone to go get treatment. They, have had a severe speech or aphasia issue, or they're bedbound for whatever reason. And so these patients come into our ER and we know that patient, certainly they need surgery. Very likely they're going to need adjuvant radiation therapy. Where we have started seeing a tremendous use in this is really because those patients are going to have surgery, and then we know they're going to have to go to rehab because they are not going to be well enough to go home after surgery. Rehab typically delays the time until they can get radiation therapy, and sometimes it can be months. And so if we say, we don't want you to wait, you've got a highly malignant brain tumor, we want to take it out, but we want to get you treated so that you don't have to wait 2 to 3 months before you start radiation, because in that time, these tumors can come roaring back even before they even start radiation. And so for us, it is a tremendous benefit to be able to say, let's give you surgery, give you gamatile so that you're starting radiation early, and then you can go off to rehab, and we don't worry about them not having a rapid early progression of the tumor.
Thank you. That was really important.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have some questions for Dr. McCracken?
Dr. McCracken.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. I had 4 tiles implanted on my second surgery, and I'm fine.
Wow.
I'm at 27 months and I'm doing great. I couldn't even tell they were in. So
Yeah.
I'm all for gamma tiles.
Yeah, that's I'm so glad to hear that. We have very similar success stories. I'm so happy it went well for you. I mean, we've used it in recurrent glioblastomas for a lot of patients, and they have basically gone on about their lives and almost like nothing ever happened. So I'm so glad to hear that it went really well for you.
So I'm not clear on this. For GBM, for gamma tile therapy, I know it's FDA approved, but is it approved as for standard of care?
So that's a good question. So standard of care as it stands right now is STU protocol, right? It's surgical resection, what we call a maximal safe surgical resection, followed by, and then 4 weeks later, you start STUP protocol, which is 6 weeks of concurrent radiation and temozolomide. So that's standard of care. So right now, having gamma tile in the upfront setting for newly diagnosed GBM is technically not standard of care. That's why these trials are ongoing, to see if it shows a benefit. And then hopefully, if we say, hey, this is doing really well, could this be included in the standard of care paradigm?
Thank you very much. And upfront care means what you're going to receive right at the beginning of your diagnosis, including
Correct.
surgery. So that's upfront. All right. Thank you so much. That was amazing. So we have your contact information. We are going to show all these. We're going to share everything that we can with everybody who registered. So if you have any questions whatsoever for Dr. McCracken, please reach out to him directly. He is a wealth of information. He's a gamma tile expert, and we can't thank you enough for presenting today. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, please call, email me, find me on Facebook or Instagram. You're welcome to.
Dr. McCracken is, by the way, very, very active on social media, and we will be sharing. Oh, here it is right here in front of us. Feel free to reach out to him via social media as well. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Have a great day.
Right, bye-bye.
Okay, our presenter that we have is Dr. David Andrews next. He is with IMVAX. So when I say IMVAX, it doesn't always sound right. It's IMVAX. And he is going to talk today about a phase 2B study of IGV 001 in newly diagnosed GBM. He is the Chief Medical Officer and founder of IMVAX, and he has over 30 years of experience as an academic brain tumor neurosurgeon, completing his residency at New York Presbyterian Cornell and a fellowship at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, both in New York. As a junior attending neurosurgeon, he received a prestigious NIH Physician Scientist Award to study brain tumors. And he has devoted his career to find better treatments for GBM, for glioblastoma. He currently serves at St. Thomas Jefferson University Hospital as professor and vice chair of clinical services, Department of Neurological Surgery, and chief of the division of neuro-oncology. Dr. Andrews, are you here?
I am, and it's a pleasure to be here, Delanne and Susan both.
Thank you.
And thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely.
Let me see if I can share my screen with you here.
Thanks so much.
Tell me if you can see this.
Not yet.
give it a few seconds. If not, I know Sarah's here. She's got the deck if we can't, if we
And
can't
we,
upload it.
and we have it too, if we need it also. So while we're waiting, just want to really thank you for coming today to present. I know it's late your time, so thank you so much. We are excited to hear more about what's going on.
Sure, let's have Sarah bring the deck up. For some
Okay.
reason, it's not coming up. So again, pleasure to be here, and I can't think of a better cause. This is the Brain Tumor Awareness Month. Gray matters, as we all know.
Yes, it sure does.
So Delenn, you've been actually, I think were you the founder of
Yeah, crazy enough.
Brain Cancer Initiative?
Yeah, my late husband and I actually founded the organization 3 weeks before he passed away, because we just knew there was a better way to serve this patient population. And so here is your slide deck.
Fantastic. Okay, let's roll. So I'm, as you pointed out, I'm an academic neurosurgeon. I founded this company in 2015, and we got FDA approval to go forward in actually December of this past year. So
Wow.
we are open and accruing patients. So let's go to the next slide. So what is IGV-001? It is actually a personalized cell-based therapy. When it's a patient's own tumor cell, is called an autologous treatment, taking your own cells and then actually using them as a source of an immune treatment. We have what is called GoldSpire, which is our immuno-oncology platform for not just glioblastoma, but other solid tumors. But really our major focus, since I'm a neurosurgeon, is glioblastoma, and we'll get into the newly diagnosed glioblastoma trial. So it's an investigational treatment. Again, as I just mentioned, it's FDA approved. By launching a phase 2b trial, the idea is that with success, we'll go on to a phase 3, and actually with regulatory approval, then it will be a new standard of care. So that's the trajectory that we're aspiring to here. I'll finish near the end of the talk with a phase 1 study that actually fueled this phase 2b study. And we'll go into that in a second. Next slide. So how does this work? It's actually great that Jay McCracken was on. We're actually involved with Piedmont actually as well. But the upfront treatment of glioblastoma is sort of a frontier. Most of the work that's being done is with recurrent disease, because there's really no standard of care when these tumors recur. So what happens here is the cadence is one in which, sort of like GammaTile, you're actually intervening at the inception of treatment. So craniotomy is performed. The difference being that instead of tissue going to pathology and the rest of it being discarded, all of that tissue is actually collected, sent to our cell production facility in Philadelphia, and then sent back to the site, where in fact is then implanted in the abdomen. Now, how did I come up with this idea of putting something in the abdomen, a malignant brain tumor? Well, certainly abdominal incisions we make all the time as neurosurgeons for a different procedure called a ventricular peritoneal shunt. From a immunologic standpoint, the belly button or the umbilicus is sort of the meridian for lymphatic drainage. Anything above the umbilicus goes north, anything below the umbilicus goes south. So we implant these chambers. These are small biodiffusion chambers about the size of a dime, into which, when the tumor comes out, we process the cells into single cell suspensions at the cell facility. We put them in these chambers, and we actually then treat them for a period of time with actually another agent called IMV-001, which is a molecule that works against a protein that actually we think maintains the malignant phenotype in GBM and just about every other solid tumor. So we treat the cells with IMV-001, we encapsulate them in this chamber. We then spike the chamber with additional IMV-001 so that actually excess IMV-001 diffuses out of the chamber when implanted in the patient. So we have living cells going into the abdomen in these small chambers. We also radiate the chambers before we implant them. These are all FDA requirements. They didn't like the idea of redistributing a live cancer elsewhere in the body, even though it's a tumor that doesn't really survive very well outside the central nervous system. The chambers remain in the patient, so we make incisions in the abdomen during the closure of the craniotomy. Cell production process takes place, and 2 days later, next slide, we can go through this process. The cells come back and they're implanted. So when the biodiffusion chambers are in, what's diffusing out of these chambers, which actually have a very small exclusion limit. So cells are about 20 microns. So there's the pore size of these chambers is a 0.5 micron. So dying cells, so we drive these cells to a cell death during the time in which they're implanted. And this is releasing the full antigen payload of that particular tumor in that particular patient. So just to be clear, 98% of solid tumors have mutations which are unique to that tumor and to that patient. So you can't use a single somatic mutation and hope that it has any impact on the course of that disease and that tumor. So by implanting these chambers, again, it's below the umbilicus. Whatever is diffusing out of those chambers is actually activating the innate immune system. Next slide. Which then it trickles down to the lymph nodes in the groin, where in fact the adaptive immune system then takes over. So this is the protocol, and if you have interest, you just have to go to clinicaltrials.gov. You don't need to know the clinical trials gov identifier. You can just actually punch in IGV-001 and you'll come up with this trial. And all the details of that trial will be there. Next slide. So how can a study, what can they expect? We talked about the craniotomy to remove the tumor. So the phase 2 trial, we have enough confidence that the impact of this is going to lead to not only better progression-free survival, but overall survival. But we have to do this with a double-blinded prospective randomized trial, because unfortunately, since this TROOP trial was initiated almost 20 years ago, there's been no progress, even with very more recent generation immunotherapy treatments. So the only way to convince the FDA that this is really truly having an impact is to randomize patients between implanting chambers that are fully formulated for this treatment in 2/3 of patients, while 1/3 get a placebo, which is essentially the chamber with nothing in it. When patients are in front of this, they may say, well, I don't want to be in a placebo arm. And we can certainly understand that. But again, this is double-blinded. The likelihood is you're going to get the treatment. But if you're not getting the treatment, you're actually by being enrolled in a trial, and particularly when this is called an add-on placebo, you're getting standard of care, and you're getting standard of care at a concierge level. You're getting much more attention. In fact, there's literature that supports the fact that if you're enrolled in a trial, your outcome is going to be better regardless when compared to community treatment. So we think that there's actually, with FDA strong support for this is the way forward. So the cadence is, go to the next slide. The primary objective is to prevent progression of disease. So that's an early indicator. So that when the disease progresses, that's the median progression-free survival. That's the point at which there's recurrence, and then subsequent treatment could involve reoperation or a different route of chemotherapy or some means of controlling the tumor. And of course, overall survival is the overall objective. In our 1B trial, which I'll close with, there's a very high correlation between progression-free survival and overall survival. And of course, as with a 1B trial, safety is a very important objective as well. Next. This is a very busy slide, and I'm going to have you refer to actually the clinicaltrials.gov to get a better sense of the flow here, but essentially it's everything I've just mentioned. But this does go to you implant the chambers 2 days after the surgery itself, you explant the chambers 2 days later. So the entire process is taking place during one hospitalization, which is under standard of care and a DRG. So it's before 6.2 days. So we're not extending hospital stay by DRG standards at all. So the entire treatment is done within that hospitalization. But the immune response is then actually going to persist thereafter. And that's where we get into the responses. Next slide. So I've already talked about the design of the study. Next slide. So we can kind of say there's sort of 5 periods then. So there's a screening period where we make sure that patients are eligible for the trial. The randomization takes place literally intraoperatively. So as neurosurgeons, we're in front of these patients and we're typically saying, we think this is what this is. But it's actually, we know what it is, but we just need now confirmation with the frozen section. So with that assurance, we actually have patients consent to this procedure before we actually get a diagnosis. But the vast majority of patients have this disease, and thus intraoperatively, based on the frozen section, if it's actually confirmed as malignant glioma, they're randomized to this trial. So the randomization period occurs the same day as craniotomy. 2 days later, we do the implant. The treatment period is thereafter. Under treatment, their initial follow-ups at 14 and 28 days, and then standard of care takes place at 6 weeks. Now, standard of care, which is adjuvant treatment, can be 2, 4, or 6 weeks later. Anything beyond 6 weeks is considered outside of that envelope of standard of care as practiced in the Stoop protocol. We found that 6 weeks, based on actually consortium meta-analysis, the RTOG, this is over 3,000 patients, that actually 6 weeks has some advantage over 2 to 4 weeks. So by pushing adjuvant treatment out to 6 weeks, it's allowing the adaptive immune system to actually take hold. Because I think, as Dr. McCracken said and others, radiation and chemotherapy will actually deplete the immune system. And if this is an immunotherapy, we're working against ourselves by moving the radiation and chemotherapy up to earlier points in time. Next. So what happens if patients are interested in enrolling? So we talk about the risks, the benefits. There is very little risk, we think, or any, to these abdominal incisions. So based on the 1B trial, which I'll go through in a second, there were no really adverse events with this 33 patient trial. So you go through an informed consent, we go through the screening period, and then off to surgery. And of course, participants can withdraw it with their consent to participate at any time in the study and for any reason. Next slide. So eligibility is based on what we see preoperatively, and that's obviously first, the MRI scan is the key piece. We need an MRI scan that shows a contrast enhancing lesion in the supratentorial region. So we can't treat lesions in the brainstem or the cerebellum, particularly the brainstem. We can't get enough tissue to actually initiate this trial. So we need a threshold level of tissue to make this product to reimplant in the patient. We go through other standard blood tests. I mean, these are actually inclusion criteria that are quite universal. Next. So it has to be newly diagnosed glioblastoma, ages 18 to 70. I mean, it sort of, it tugs at my heart that we can't treat patients older than 70. And that's only because if we're trying to actually emulate standard of care as currently practiced, the Stoop protocol did not include patients older than 70. And really, to compare apples to apples, if we're trying to push to change standard of care, we have to compare that to what the current standard of care practice is. So we hope in the life cycle of this product that we can actually initiate a trial for patients older than 70, and that will be a future endeavor. Next slide. So exclusion criteria, again, this you can go to actually the clinicaltrials.gov website to get those details. Next. So this was the phase 1b study that we published 2 years ago. So this was a dose escalation of this product in actually cohorts of 8 patients each. So typically you escalated a treatment by escalating the dose of that drug. In this case, it's what's coming out of that chamber, which is unique to each patient. So we can't actually identify an API or an active pharmaceutical ingredient or a drug. So it was the number of chambers and the amount of time that chamber was in the patient. So we randomized 23 patients with either 10 chambers implanted for 24 hours, 10 chambers for 48 hours, 20 chambers for 24 hours, or 20 chambers for 48 hours. But what we found was that by the 23rd patient, the highest dose of 20 chambers for 48 hours, those patients were outperforming all the others, and also actually mounting immune responses that were actually durable and far greater than the other cohorts. So that's what we carried into the actual phase 2b study that we're actually open with now. So as mentioned, this was very well tolerated, no immune-related adverse events. Initially, based on the incisions we were making in the abdomen, we were trying to create more room for the chambers. We had some hemorrhages that we realized we could avoid by not going above or below the inscriptions, which are, that's your 6-pack if you're really fit. So you just stay within 2 inscriptions and none of that happens. And again, the paper, which is referenced here, published in just a little over 2 years ago, extended both progression-free survival and overall survival. Next slide. So again, this is about MVAX. We are in Philadelphia. That's where the cell production process takes place. We've enrolled 5 patients so far, so it's just the beginning of our journey, but we have 25 sites actually on the East Coast and all the way south to Jacksonville and west to Madison, Wisconsin. So our website is www.invax.com. For those interested, if you want to pursue this and you're in that envelope, it's essentially 1,000 miles from our production facility, then we can probably accommodate you. So I'll stop there. Next slide, I think that's the last slide. And open to any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Andrews. That is fascinating. Fascinating. I'm going to be quiet for a minute and let our audience ask you questions, and then I have a question for you. And I see a person clapping. I love it. Love it. Anyone have questions for Dr. Andrews? Well, first of all, I just would like to thank MVAX and yourself for investing, real dollars, right, into research for newly diagnosed GBM patients, because like you said, it is an area that needs more investment into it. There needs to be more research. Exactly. So thank you for doing that. I appreciate you talking about something that we sometimes forget to talk to patients about, and that is when you are entered into a clinical trial and you are participating, there is a level of what we call concierge service. Can you talk about that again? Because that was really important. Also, the part where there is documentation about people who are enrolled in a clinical trial who receive concierge service. They do survive better, and they do better on that, whatever that treatment option is.
That's been documented. There's the recent publications as recently as last year. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's sort of intuitive, isn't it? You really get a lot of attention. And I think in a broader sense, I will say this as a general statement, and all of my colleagues who have been on this seminar today, these are, and I'm looking at Ashley, and thankfully you didn't have a GBM, But the patients with malignant disease are probably the most gracious and courageous people I've ever dealt with in oncology. So I think when you look in a broader view, what we're doing is we're accelerating a treatment that by doing a placebo-controlled, double-blinded placebo-controlled trial, and with their participation, even if they recognize there's a third of a chance that they may only get a placebo, that if this is successful, I mean, it will have a much broader impact on the entire cohort of patients that have this disease.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. We will put up your contact information again, and also for anyone who's interested in learning more about this clinical trial. And for those of you who do not like to go to clinicaltrials.gov, MVAX has put together a website actually specifically for families and patients for this particular trial. And there's also an email right there in front of you that you can email. It's patients@mvax.com, where you can email your questions, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things I noticed a few days ago, I was on clinicaltrials.gov, I was on this particular clinical trial, and, you know, there are several sites that aren't recruiting yet, but there will be. But is it okay for me just to quickly run off the sites that are recruiting?
Sure.
It's so Tufts Medical Center, which is in Boston, Henry Ford Health System, that's part of the Detroit, Michigan area, Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center, New Hampshire. I'm not sure how to say this. Montefiore Medical Center, which is in the Bronx, Northwell Health at North Shore University Hospital, New York. Let's see, we've got Cornell is recruiting in New York. We have, Lenox Hill. I did a great talk there one time. They're recruiting. UC Health, Cincinnati, Ohio. The Ohio State University Wexner Medical Center is recruiting. Rhode Island Hospital is recruiting. West Virginia University, West Virginia recruiting. That was 2 days ago when I pulled that report, but there's several more sites that are going to be coming on that are recruiting. So
yeah, Columbia is activated.
Okay.
Sloan Kettering is activated.
Really, really cool. And if anyone ever feels like they want to just email EBCI and ask, hey, is whatever we heard about today, is it recruiting where I'm at X? You know, we're happy to look that up for you, and of course provide information for you to put you in direct contact with that principal investigator or that site that is recruiting, that is as close to you, or of course, all of our presenters today provided really great information on how to get a hold of them. So that is amazing. Anyone else have a question for Dr. Andrews?
I'm going to jump in because people are being very, very courteous and putting in the chat. So why are patients with both sides of the brain involved with GBM not eligible? So those are called butterfly gliomas. We actually included them in the 1B trial. So one thing that I learned was we weren't cherry pickers, we took everybody. Butterfly gliomas unfortunately have a really very poor prognosis, and we actually found that in the phase 1B study. We actually did extend life in one patient, but they're generally, it's not even written, but no prospective randomized trial will include them. It's a very small subpopulation. So you're taking a high unmet need and trebling it when it becomes bihemispheric.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Appreciate it. Thank you. We are going to go back to Ashley Birdwell right now, and we're going to learn a little more about what is neuro rehab. So Ashley, I'm going to pop this back to you. Sean is actually, and we are going to find in your slide deck where you left off, if we may.
hold on one sec. Sorry, I was, this share screen business is tricky. Where is it? Let's see. Oh gosh. One sec.
No problem. And if you want Sean to pop that up, she can.
No, I feel like it's gonna be right here. Let's see. Here. Okay. Now, slideshow, right? We good? Can everybody see?
Yes.
Good. Okay. So we talked about neuromuscular reeducation, compensatory strategies. So just quickly, a few slides left. Additional rehabilitation professionals can include adaptive recreation therapists, because play is super important for recovery. Joy and laughter and, you know, just mental health, anything that boosts your mental health is crucial. Psychiatry physicians that can help with medications for mood, psychology, or counselors or social workers, or whoever in your state provides the independent counseling certification, does talk therapy and helps you process and adjust to disability if that's something that has come about as a result of your tumor. Vocational rehabilitation specialists. So for folks that are wanting to get back to some kind of employment, your state vocational rehabilitation programs are typically very, very resourceful with different funding sources for education, training, equipment, just really anything to kind of get you to employment. And in the state of Arizona, it's not full-time employment that is the goal. Could be a hobby job. So even if it's something that, you know, is a 10-hour-a-week gig that just gets you out of the house, and as my grandmother used to say, gets the stink blown off you, that she was like from Dutch country, Pennsylvania. I think that it's definitely something to consider. Vision therapy, if there are any vision changes, there are optometrists and ophthalmologists that offer different types of vision therapy. Some occupational therapists in the neurorehabilitation setting will also offer visual therapy, and that's typically to get the eyes teaming or working together again, or neuroconvergence of the eyes. And when those eyeballs are working together a little better, you're certainly less anxious and you're less fatigued as well. Additionally, vision therapy can be to help learn how to compensate for a visual field loss. I had a homonymous hemianopsia to the left, which is a full visual field cut to the left, and learning to compensate for that visual field defect on a 50,000 person campus at ASU was a little tricky. But I did have a voc rehab specialist come to campus with me and teach me how to ride the bus. And that was before the internet. So there was like a bus schedule. It was a book. And then last but certainly not least, physiatry, not to be confused with psychiatry. So physiatry is a specialty of medicine called physical medicine and rehabilitation. The physiatrists at Barrow are wonderful. Dr. Christina Kwasnika is the medical director of the inpatient Barrow Neurological Institute Neuro Rehab, and she is a PM&R doc. And so essentially the way I explain physiatry to folks is just that it's a physical medicine doc that is going to look at the entire health, wellness, and function of the body after something neurological happens. So at Barrow, just very quickly, to show you kind of the spectrum of what's typically or what could be available at an institute near you, is we have traditional outpatient rehabilitation services where you'll come maybe 2 or 3 times a week for an hour for each discipline. So PT, OT, and speech, or whatever you need. I call it our a la carte program, because you can kind of pick and choose the services that are appropriate for you. We do need a doctor's order, so it does need to go through your physician. Bridge Neuro Rehab at Barrow is a brand new partial day treatment program for patients. So it's a half day, 4 days a week, with a smattering of group therapy plus neuropsychology services. And then we have the Center for Transitional Neuro Rehabilitation, or the CTN program, which is a full day neuro rehab program, 5 days a week, average length of stay being 12 to 16 months. And they focus on independent living and or vocational rehabilitation. Movement disorder outpatient rehab. This is where I get all of my care for my dystonia, is through the movement disorder clinic. I get my Botox injections there, as well as all of my anti-spasticity meds. And so if there's a movement disorder specialist that's available, it might be worthwhile to check out to see as far as spasticity and upper extremity limb use, if there's some kind of interventions like deep brain stimulation or Botox or just all kinds of modalities that are now available. And there's so many others, lymphedema therapy, visual therapy, the whole deal. So, so just as a quick example of how rehab works is, so if you'll see on the right-hand side, you'll see, or on my right, you'll see that there's a couple of circles, and down here in the bottom left quadrant, I'm trying to make a dot, and after, so this is 25, almost 20, almost 20 years post brain tumor disease. And you can see after 6 weeks of using this upper extremity robot to help neuromuscularly retrain my muscles, there's progress. That's 24 years. And you can see in some of them that are more marked than others, but my favorite one is the, it started out looking like an oval over here. And over here, we look at it a little bit more like a circle. So that's, I think, probably the most demonstrative image as far as progress that was made in my own upper extremity after 24 years post-surgical. So, you know, people say that you make the most amount of progress within the first 12 months. I think that you make the quickest progress within the first 12 months, but you don't stop making progress. It's just slower, and the milestones get further apart. So as far as additional new technology on my face, so I have a left homonymous hemianopsia, which is what you're seeing here as far as the representation of the vision. This is how I see. Our brain is really smart, and it makes up the other side of the image. So I think that I'm seeing the whole picture, but I'm really only seeing half of it. So it makes it very important that I look around before I gossip, as a joke. So now I have these prism glasses on my face. And if I wanted to, I could add a special prism on the left side of each of these lenses that would allow me to catch light so that I could see to the left a little fuller. But I'm a tough patient, and I've learned to compensate for my visual field deficit by turning my head. And I've tried the prism glasses, and although I feel like they're helpful as far as convergence and getting my eyes to team together, I'm just not going to get used to that little lens there. So, but they are out there, and they are very, very helpful for patients. And then lastly, just to kind of wrap things up, we have at the Ivy Brain Tumor Center, we have blogs, we have videos, we have all kinds of information about what's available through Barrow outpatient neuro rehab services, as well as the patient and caregiver education seminar that we did, I think maybe earlier in the year. And I have a full talk on this website about what it's like to be a patient, and some caregiver education and some rehab education. And I would encourage you to check it out if you're more interested in hearing about rehabilitation and the journey of somebody on the other side. And I am super grateful that I had a recoverable prognosis, and having surgeries and being a part of being a patient at an early age has really helped me understand both sides of the desk. And I am always so inspired by people that are just fighting this fight. So for all of you survivors on the line, like, you guys are doing it. And I pray for you every night. And thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of this special day, and all of these brilliant neurosurgeons and neurologists. And I'm honored to be a part of the panel here. So thank you so much, Jillian. I really appreciate you reaching out to me to ask me to give kind of the softer talk here.
Thank you, Ashley, so very, very much. Really informative. I sincerely appreciate it. So Ashley and I have kind of talked about this, but she doesn't know the date yet that we kind of decided. So we're going to talk, but the End Brain Cancer Initiative is going to be putting on a similar online webinar event meeting like this on August 4th. And it's really for caregivers, and it's a caregiver self-care. It's a series of information that we're going to be doing. We'll have another one in November during National Caregiver Self-Care Month, but we will be inviting Ashley to come and be on our panel on August 4th for our caregiver self-care session. So thank you so much. Ashley, I have a super quick question for you. The Bridge Neuro Rehab Program at Barrows, correct? Okay, is it, it's a half-day program. Is it a drop-in program or not?
So it's a great question. So the Bridge program is our brand new service line. We opened our doors right before COVID. Super awesome timing, not. But the Bridge program is a highly structured 16-week program from start to finish, including PT, OT, speech, neuropsych, and social work.
Fantastic.
So it is something where you know, we have a physician or a prescription from the doctor, and then we get you started with a cohort, and we call them cohorts because there are 2 or 3 patients that start at the same time that kind of travel through the program together. So all of your group work is done with the same 2 participants. And it's funny because, you know, people come in and they say, well, I don't want to do the groups. And then at the end, it's the thing everybody loves the most.
Yeah, exactly. So there's programs like this in other places in the United States, right?
Yeah, I think that probably the Brain Tumor Association in your state, or the Brain Injury Association or Alliance in your state, likely has an information and referral line, or they have a website where they might list rehabilitation facilities that are neuro specific. And I'm glad you said that, Delanne, because my last little plug here is, wherever you're at when you're researching a rehabilitation center for especially outpatient, be sure that they're offering the neuro rehabilitation services, because we've all, you know, there are those orthopedic physical therapist spots where you go in and, you know, they're working on people's hips and knees and ankles, and those are great if those are kind of what you're working with. But the neuro rehabilitation piece is people that specialize in working with neuroplasticity, neurorobotics, you know, are knowledgeable about how things like eSTEM work with treatments. And, you know, there's definitely a nuance to working with brain tumor disease patients in the neuro rehab setting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much. I mean, that was just really, really informative. So we look forward to talking to you again. And again, there is information that Ashley provided if any of you have any questions as well, right?
And I think, I don't know if my email address is readily accessible. Maybe I didn't return that last email, Delanne, I apologize. But you can get me at Ashley, ASHLEY.Bridwell, my last name, B as in boy, RIDWELL, at dignityhealth.org. Yep. Oh, there it is. Great. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's all my stuff right there. That's me. So please feel free to reach out if you have any questions. I'm always happy to talk about, you know, my favorite person, moi, and our rehabilitation programming and just how special the Barrow Neuro Rehab Institute is.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Have a great afternoon and a weekend as well.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm going to click off and go to my next meeting here, but wow, what an incredible afternoon you organized. Thanks to all the speakers and all the patients that are on. You guys are the best. Talk to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we are going to flip gears for just a little bit. I wanted to share with everybody a study that's going on, and it's a study. All right. So I want to make sure everyone understands this is not a clinical trial. This is an actual study. It's a patient study and it's a caregiver study. And we are working in collaboration with a healthcare consultancy company called Adelphi Values. Adelphi is located out of Boston. That's the office we're working with. And we are recruiting actually for patients who have first recurrent GBM, glioblastoma. And our recruitment process is literally a 10-minute Q&A session with the patient and the caregiver separately, as well as you providing us your documentation that proves basically that you have a first recurrent GBM. And so just to let you know, we depersonalize your medical information, so you are not identifiable. But the rest of the story is that Adelphi will schedule a 45-minute interview with the patient and the caregiver together. And they will also ask the caregiver to go online and submit a 10-minute questionnaire. And so the purpose behind doing this is, you know, pharma companies, industry companies are very, very interested in hearing the patient voice when they are starting to think about developing a protocol for a clinical trial. They want to develop that protocol so that there's less burden to the patient and less burden to the caregiver, less burden to their family. And they want to hear from patients and caregivers what those burdens are like. So it's kind of that opportunity, if this is something you would like to do, to have your voice heard. So just let us know if that's something that you and your caregiver would like to participate in. We are officially recruiting for the recurrent patient-reported outcomes for recurrent GBM patients study at the Brain Cancer Initiative. I am the primary contact for that study. Again, my email is on your screen and my phone number is on your screen. You can text me anytime. But we'd love to have some more participants for this particular study and close it out so that the company can move forward in creating what I believe is a new clinical trial protocol for for recurrent GBM patients. Thank you so much. And with that, I would like to bring Sean Drennan up, and Sean's going to talk a little bit about, last year was our 20th year of serving patients and families and caregivers. So we wanted to do something special to mark that amazing 2 decades. And we created in collaboration with Vobo, VOBO, which is a app company, and lots of sponsorship dollars to help us provide disease education for our new app. And so we're developing that out, but we wanted to talk about that a little bit with you today. Sean?
Hi, so welcome everybody. I agree with everyone before. This has been just a fantastic afternoon. So I'm going to see if I can actually conquer all of our technology issues and do something really interesting here. So as you can see on the screen, we have a brand new app out there. And what I am going to try to do is to bring up the app on my phone so you can see it. Okay, let's go with it. Start broadcast. And it should be coming. Yes. Okay, look at that. We're getting dangerously close now. So here is our EBCI app live and in the flesh. I don't have any idea what that little head thing is. We'll get it out of the way. So this app is literally a brain cancer library in your hand. And the intent here was to have as much information as we could put into the hands of caregivers and to patients as they went in to talk to their doctors. And as you can see here, we've got quite a few categories on our main screens as to what's available in here. So a couple of things that I want to just highlight, just to give you a flavor for it, is meetings and events. We put all kinds of meetings, including the one we're on right now, and anything with any other partners around the country and even the globe that we know about, we will add into our app here. And those include links to register to go see them. We also have all kinds of peer-reviewed articles in our research. ASCO, SNO events each year are a fantastic source for a lot of those pieces of information. We have some additional articles that show some early on, very promising information that may have come from some different sources that we like to include in this. And it goes on and on. There's quite a bit there. One thing I'd also like to highlight, it's very important on here, is we have a clinical trials. These are open and enrolling trials that we've become aware of that we list in here. And these, for the most part, these links go into the patient-friendly information for each of these trials. In some cases, it does go directly to the clinicaltrials.gov if that's the only information we have available. We are constantly updating this with new trials as we become aware of them. Another thing to keep in mind is we have a thing called channels, and these are some fantastic partner support groups that we have here that have set up their own channels that have information on their products and their treatments and their trials. So as a couple of examples out here, let's see, let's get on here. So this is, for instance, the one from Northwest Biotherapeutics. It's one of our newer ones that we've just added on, but we have a ton of information that they've put out there on their product, the DC Vax, and some of the trials that they've got going for that. We also have several other sponsors that have trials, and many of them have spoken with us here today. So this is a fantastic, comprehensive tool, and it's available now for everyone. All you have to do is go to our website, and there is a landing page there for the app, and you can click right in, do a small registration form, and you'll be hooked right up with all the information. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Sean. That was really great. One of the things I would say is we are hiring a disease education mobile app manager because there's so much information out there, which is awesome, that we are not able to manage that with all of our regular day jobs. And so we're wanting to hire a professional to manage our app. And so they're going to be literally procuring information for brain tumors and brain cancer treatments and specialists and things like that. And they're going to be loading that up on our app so that everybody can have access to it. So eventually the app will actually have a whole lot more information on it. Plus we'll be using it to distribute information as well. So really excited about the app. Absolutely.
All right.
Okay, so if no questions related to our disease education app, we will move forward. And I wanted to open it up for just Q&A. If anyone else has any questions for any of the EBCI staff or any of our speakers, now it would be a great time to ask those. Okay. Again, we want to thank Ono Pharmaceutical and IMVAX and GammaTile for supporting this particular Know All of Our Treatment Options event today. Thank you. It's made possible by a lot of different supporters as well. I mentioned that on August 4th, we're going to have part of our series of our National Caregiver Self-Care series will be happening, and we have a slide for that. And it's the registration is actually open for it. It is free. If you go to our website, search on the tab that says meetings/events, and you'll be able to scroll down and click on our caregiver series and register. And also there is a QR code right in front of you on your screen. You can literally put your phone up there, scan it and register, or you can also see the URL on the slide in front of you as well to register. So spread the word, please. Again, I just would like to go to our support page if I could. I wanted to thank everyone for all of your support. So literally Endeavor Biomedicines, Cox Media, of course, us, Great Purpose Productions, WIM Social, Medexus Pharma, Ono Pharmaceutical is our presenting sponsor today. IMVAX, GammaTile, Cure, Northwest Biotherapeutics, Core Cryo, Piedmont Brain Tumor Center in Atlanta, Georgia, Ivy Brain Tumor Center in Arizona. Also, Novacure has provided support for general disease education about know all your treatment options, as well as Genentech. And of course, there are individual supporters that provide dollars to support our mission all of the time. So again, thank you so much. It is our pleasure to deliver this kind of programming to the brain tumor patient community. more and more and more. And with that, you guys, we are going to put up a slide that's just going to have some contact information for us at the End Brain Cancer Initiative. So feel free to reach out to us anytime. We are here to help you. We're here to provide for you. And really, we just think of us as that walking hand, and we're holding your hand and holding you up all of the time. So if there's anything we can do for you, let us know. And some of the presenters we will be seeing in about less than 2 weeks in Chicago at ASCO, the American Society for Clinical Oncology meeting. And we look forward to those meetings with you there in Chicago. Thanks, you guys. We're going to wrap it up. Everybody have an amazing evening, night, morning, weekend. It was really exciting to see the global folks from all around the world that joined us today. So thank you so much. Blessings.
Great program, Dylan. Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you. Oh, thank you, Dr. Lavrance. Bye-bye. Thank you.
See you.